The boy flinched at the sight of Xianxi's battered form, but he didn't flee. That hesitation just bought him a front-row seat to a throne's collapse and a ruler's last gamble. Leave a like and subscribe before the Abyssal Knight's curiosity runs out. An unknown amount of time had passed in peace and silence when a timid figure suddenly entered Xianxi's vision. He was an unhealthy-looking boy who looked to be in his early teens at best. His face was gaunt, and his skin was coarse and dark in a way that didn't fit his age. He flinched when he saw Xianxi lying on the bed looking bruised and battered, but he did not leave immediately. He swept his gaze across the room quickly as if he was looking for someone or something. When he couldn't find it, he hesitated for a moment before gathering his courage. "Big B, I mean Senior, do you know where Senior Sister Lingzhu is? I heard that she's back from her trip." Xianxi shot him a warm look and answered, "She is back, but she isn't here right now. She's probably meeting her master right now." The youngster looked disappointed, but he replied politely, "Got it. Thank you for telling me, Senior." Judging from his cautious demeanor, it was clear that he wasn't supposed to be here. Dejected, the young man was about to leave when Xianxi added, "However, she should be back very soon. If you wish to see her, you might want to stay here for a while longer." The youngster's eyes immediately lit up. He nodded strongly and said, "Okay. I'll wait as long as it takes to see Senior Sister Lingzhu." A second later, he dropped his head and muttered, "As long as I'm not caught." Back to Mo Kangying and Helian Lingzhu, the duo were going to return to the Empire immediately after bidding Ku Xian goodbye, but in the end, they decided to inform Xianxi about their departure before doing so. It would bring shame to the Empire if they couldn't even practice proper etiquette, or so Helian Lingzhu claimed. Mo Kangying had no choice but to accept. When they got close to the room, they heard a young man's voice saying, "In the Ximen Abyss realm, 99% of our cultivators cultivate the earth profound energy as their primary element, and wine profound energy as their secondary. I'm the same, and I can summon a pretty big sandstorm. According to my master, the reason the Ximen Abyss realm is the center of attraction of all earth profound practitioners is because it is the place with the greatest amount of earth profound energy in the entire world. Very few people cultivate it beyond the Ximen Abyss realm, though my master said that it was mainly because everyone looks down on earth profound energy. They believe that people who cultivate to become good at defense are cowards, which is a lie." The youngster's voice took on a tinge of indignance. "There are plenty of amazing people who cultivate earth profound energy. We've even produced an Abyssal Knight in the past." The young man's eyes lit up with admiration when he said the words, "Abyssal Knight. I even heard that he was made a pioneer by the Abyssal Monarch himself. His name is Mo Baiken, and he is the 779th Abyssal Knight titled the Dust Guardian. He's a member of the Abyss Xilen realm." The youngster was practically oozing pride with every word. Xianxi's smile didn't change, but his pupils contracted just a little when he heard the familiar name. "Mo Baiken, it seems that you and I are tied by fate. He was the man who nearly drove the God realm to a dead end. He had taken Qianai Yinger's grandfather and great-grandfather from Qianai Yinger, and the 3 Yama ancestors and He Ling from him. How could he ever forget Mo Baiken? Senior," the youngster's voice abruptly grew small and forlorn, "do you think the eternal Pure Land really exists in this world? I heard that it's a place where abyssal dust doesn't exist. I heard that it's filled with green grass, tall trees, and something called a flower that has a lot of colors. I heard that the sky is blue, and the children who live there do not need to be protected from birth. I heard that they do not need to worry about erosion even if they do not cultivate, much less discarded just because their talent is weak. Those children are free to grow however they like. Does a place like this truly exist, Senior?" What he described was the norm to Xianxi. In fact, it was so normal that few people in his world would even think about it, much less consider it a luxury. But to the youngster, it was a beautiful dream that only existed in fantasy. It was so beautiful that he literally couldn't believe that it was real. "Of course it exists," Xianxi replied firmly. Outside the room, Helian Lingzhu unconsciously stopped in her tracks. Surprise flickered behind the youngster's eyes, but it dimmed as quickly as it came. "What, have you seen the eternal Pure Land before?" Xianxi smiled. "It's not a matter of whether it's real, but whether you believe it or not." Believe? The youngster had lived under his better's protection from a young age. Therefore, he wasn't nearly mature enough to understand what Xianxi meant. "Belief is one of the greatest powers in the world," Xianxi said gently yet firmly. "If one day you need a miracle to save you, the only way it might happen is if you believe that it will happen." If you desire the eternal Pure Land, then you should believe that it exists and strive toward it. Only then there is a chance you might find it in your lifetime. Even if you fail to find the eternal Pure Land in the end, you will have spent your whole life working toward a beautiful, noble goal. In that sense, you would have built an eternal Pure Land that belongs to you and only you and your soul, am I right? The youngster's eyes glittered like stars as he listened to Xianxi's words. This time, the light in his eyes didn't fade. Outside the room, Helian Lingzhu was speechless and unmoving for a long time as well. It wasn't until Mo Kangying stepped forward and opened the door that she finally returned to reality. The youngster looked back and spotted Helian Lingzhu immediately. Let out a cry of pure joy and surprise. "Senior Sister Lingzhu?" He jumped to his feet and pounced over to Helian Lingzhu immediately, but Mo Kangying caught his shoulders and wheeled him toward him. "Qi Chuan, did you sneak out of the Earth Palace? Do you know how dangerous it is to leave the barrier at your current strength?" The youngster withered like a leaf. It was clear that he was very afraid of Mo Kangying. I just wanted to meet Senior Sister Lingzhu." "HMPH," Mo Kangying rebuked him harshly. "If you really want to see her, then you should be cultivating as hard as you can to reach the divine soul realm. At that level, you will be allowed to leave the Earth Palace for an hour every 3 days. Instead, you chose to break all the rules just to satisfy your personal desire. Words cannot describe how deeply you've disappointed me. Have you forgotten that anyone who fails to reach the divine tribulation realm before they are 15 will be discarded? If that happens, not even your Senior Sister Lingzhu will be able to save you." Xianxi's expression didn't waver, but he was shocked on the inside. A 15-year-old divine tribulation realm profound practitioner would have been heralded as a once-in-a-lifetime genius in any divine region. But here, they were just good enough to avoid being abandoned. There was no such thing as sympathy and tolerance toward the young. Everyone here must face the cruelest law of survival since they were born. Everyone, except those who were chosen by the kingdoms of God. Xianxi suddenly recalled the memories Kai Wao had pried out of Mo Baikon's soul fragments. His 2 daughters had died from erosion because they were discarded. If he had to guess, the only thing Mo Baikon felt toward the Qilin Abyss realm after the tragedy was hatred. "Enough!" Helian Lingzhu stepped over and pulled the rebuked youngster to her side. "Qi Chuan is just a boy. Your rebuke, while true, is unnecessarily harsh." Mo Kangying was unrepentant. "I would be killing him if I pampered him. Trash does not have the right to live. Laziness and indulgence is a shortcut to a swift death. If there is one law they should remember from the moment they were born, it would be this." I know." The youngster wasn't offended by Mo Kangying's reprimands. There was only remorse and shame. "I just miss Senior Sister Lingzhu too much. She reminds me of my dead sister, and she is, in my heart, my only family left in this world. I just wanted to see her once and pretend that my sister was still alive. I promise that I won't do this anymore. I'll do my best to cultivate and—" His voice grew a little more determined. "I think I've found my direction." Helian Lingzhu snuck a glance at Xianxi before replying smilingly. "That would be for the best. Qi Chuan, you will become a great man in the future, but you will lose your talent if you are exposed to too much abyssal dust at your age. So go back to the Earth Palace as soon as possible, okay? I promise I'll visit you the next time I come to the Heavenly Palace." She patted Qi Chuan's shoulder when she finished, but the youngster abruptly flinched away from her and gasped in pain. Helian Lingzhu looked caught off guard, and Mo Kangying's frown turned into something darker. He abruptly grabbed the young man's arm and shattered his sleeve in an instant. This time, the young man let out a pained scream. His face was scrunched up together in agony. The blood drained away from Helian Lingzhu's face when she saw the state of his arm. Mo Kangying somehow managed to look even grimmer than before. Qi Chuan's right arm was grayish-dark in color. There were many long black scars on his skin as well. "Qi Chuan, you—" Helian Lingzhu's voice trembled. There were multiple times she wanted to touch his arm, but in the end, she didn't dare to. Xianxi stared fixedly at Qi Chuan's arm. "Is this how the abyssal dust eats away at the body?" "When did this happen?" Mo Kangying asked in a frigid voice. I. The youngster's face was deathly pale. It was impossible to say if it was because of the pain, the shock of being discovered, or both. "It's okay, I'll be fine." No one believed him. A couple of long, tense seconds later, Mo Kangying exhaled and declared in a grim voice, "The only way to save you now is to cut off your right arm." "No, you cannot." Helian Lingzhu shook her head immediately. "He's still far from the level where he can regrow his right arm. If he loses it, he may be discarded long before his time is up. At least he would still have a chance." Mo Kangying shook his head firmly. If we do nothing about this, then it will spread to his whole body and kill him for sure. Master can remove the abyssal dust from his arm. Helian Lingzhu hurried toward the exit. I'll visit him right. Master will not deny any request from you, Mo Kangying interrupted calmly. But are you sure you want to do this? To start a precedent that will only end in disaster? Helian Lingzhu froze in her tracks. Mo Kangying continued. Forget the abyssal Qilin realm, there are countless people in this Helian heavenly palace who are being eroded by abyssal dust every day. It is impossible to stop the erosion of abyssal dust. An exception could be made if you were anyone else, but you are the first princess of the dynasty. Once you've set a precedent, everyone will think it's okay to bring their kids to Master to treat their erosion. Master already doesn't have much time left. Are you sure you want to do this? Helian Lingzhu slowly closed her eyes. For a time, she could only bite her lip in silence. Senior Sister Lingzhu, the youngster gently pulled Helian Lingzhu's sleeve. I will never forget what you've done for me. It's my own fault that my arm is like this, so how can I trouble you to cure my arm, much less ask the palace chief to shave his own life to help me? His eyes were tearful, but he was smiling. Senior brother Mo is just like everyone says. You act stern, but you're really a very, very good person. I was afraid I would be discarded immediately when you found out, but you gave me a way to save myself. I'm glad you can think this way. Mo Kangying nodded slowly and firmly. Just because you've lost an arm doesn't mean that your life or your future is over. If you can reach the divine tribulation realm before 15, you won't be discarded despite your condition. If anything, the Helian Heavenly Palace would be very proud of you. I will do it, Qi Chuan declared, though there was a hint of uncontrollable tremor in his voice. The loss of an arm affected more than just the body, and considering how cruel the laws of survival in the abyss were, even Qi Chuan knew that his future was bleak no matter how Mo Kangying tried to dress it. The youngster mustered as much courage as he could and stammered, Please cut my arm for me, senior brother Mo, brave man. Mo Kangying nodded. The youngster closed his eyes immediately. Helian Lingzhu let out a sigh and closed her eyes as well. Just when it seemed like Qi Chuan's fate was inevitable, Xianxia said, Wait, I would like to see his injuries. Kangying raised an eyebrow. Helian Lingzhu was surprised as well. Xianxia ignored their reaction and slowly made his way to Qi Chuan's side. Your wounds, Helian Lingzhu subconsciously reached out. Don't worry, Xianxia assured her with a smile. They looked serious, but it is mostly external injuries. Thanks to the medicinal qi in this place, I have recovered much with just a few hours of rest. Before Helian Lingzhu could ask further questions, he placed a hand on the youngster's right arm and injected a very weak stream of profound qi into it. Please allow me to check the state of your arm, Qi Chuan. After his profound qi had spread throughout the youngster's arm, he quietly perceived how far the erosion had extended. Technically, abyssal dust wasn't a poison and definitely not a living thing. In essence, it was a higher power that was beyond the control of all entities who were beneath it, which was to say, everyone. That was why the so-called erosion was really much, much worse than it sounded. It was also far deadlier than any poison that the abyss was aware of. It took only a moment for Xianxia to determine Qi Chuan's condition. While this was going on, Mo Kangying's expression had turned into thinly veiled scorn. What do you think you're doing? You're not going to tell us that you have a way to remove his erosion, are you? Of course not. No one has the ability to remove erosion. Xianxia replied indifferently and removed his hand from Qi Chuan's arm. However, I do believe it would be a shame to remove his arm completely as it isn't as badly eroded as it looks. My suggestion is to remove only the eroded flesh, blood, bone, and meridians. After that, he should make a full recovery. This time, Mo Kangying made no attempts to hide his scorn. Do you even know what you're saying? Xianxia didn't rise to the provocation. We will see. Worst case scenario, he would lose the arm, which is the same if I had allowed you to cut him. Before Mo Kangying could respond, he looked at Qi Chuan and asked, Are you afraid of pain? The youngster shook his head in confusion. No, good. You will need that strength. The next second, he grabbed Qi Chuan's arm again and unleashed his profound qi. It spread out into a million tiny, invisible streams and PSSH bang, PSSH, PSSH bang, bang, bang. Countless holes abruptly exploded in the young man's arm, scattering bits of blood, flesh, and bones in every direction. In just the blink of an eye, Qi Chuan's arm looked like it had been skewered 1,000,000 times over. Qi Chuan was completely stunned and pale as a sheet, of course. He wanted to scream, but the pain was so bad that he literally couldn't. You bastard! Mo Kangying roared and stepped forward, but Helian Lingzhu held him back before he could attack Xianxia. Wait, maybe he could. Mo Kangying couldn't understand her reaction. For some reason, the first princess was trusting him almost blindly and without reason. Are you serious, junior sister? He's obviously… Before he could finish, Qi Chuan's arm exploded one last time before Xianxia withdrew his hand. The sweat-drenched youngster immediately collapsed to the ground and spasmed like he was experiencing epilepsy. He finally found it in himself to scream as well. It's done, Xianxia said indifferently. Qi Chuan? Helian Lingzhu rushed over to the youngster's side immediately. His prepubescent arm was covered in almost 100 big and small holes. It was horrifying to look at, to say the least. The first princess immediately released her profound qi to seal the wounds, but her worry immediately turned to astonishment, then from astonishment to speechless shock. Xianxia! Mo Kangying glared coldly and angrily at Xianxia. He's just a kid and his fate is pitiful enough. We did you a kindness and you would torture. Ninth senior brother, Helian Lingzhu interrupted him with barely restrained excitement. He wasn't damaging Qi Chuan's arm carelessly. All of the eroded parts in the arm are gone, and his arm is still usable. What? Mo Kangying spun toward her in shock and disbelief. He immediately went over and grabbed the youngster's tattered arm. When he sensed what she had, his shock was several times greater than even Helian Lingzhu's. She was right. The erosion was completely gone. His wounds, while absolutely horrifying to look at, were really precise incisions that severed only as much as was necessary. Flesh and blood aside, Qi Chuan's arm bones were still intact, and his most important meridians were intact as well. The small portion that was eroded was cleanly removed, and the undamaged parts were almost perfectly intact. In some extreme cases, the margin of error was so narrow it was almost non-existent. If Xianxia had cut a millimeter shallower, the erosion would not be removed. And if he had cut a millimeter deeper, then the meridian would be destroyed. It was such a careful and precise measurement that it was terrifying. Mo Kangying turned to look at the gore on the floor. Every single piece of flesh, blood and bone was grayish-dark with abyssal dust. Not even a speck of it was alive. Finally, he looked back at Xianxia and stared at him incredulously. How did you do it? Helian Lingzhu blurted. Even now, she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing, feeling with her own profound qi as she healed Qi Chuan's wounds, was real. Xianxia smiled as warmly as ever. I have a very complete set of medical knowledge, theory, and practices in my head. I was probably a doctor in the past. A doctor? Helian Lingzhu shook her head in disbelief. I know a lot of doctors, but none of them possessed your level of familiarity with the human body or control over profound qi. What you just did is absolutely beyond even the ability of our chief doctor. This time, Mo Kangying didn't refute her. Meanwhile, Qi Chuan had temporarily forgotten his pain and raised his painful, but still usable right arm and asked in disbelief. My arm is okay now. It doesn't need to be cut off anymore. It's not okay, you still need a month or two to heal it completely. But yes, it will be like your arm had never been eroded, Xianxia said smilingly before nodding in Helian Lingzhu's direction. You flatter me, first princess. It's the least I can do to repay the two of you for saving my life. He then straightened himself and continued. Now that I'm good enough, this is where we say goodbye. If we meet again, I'll be sure to repay you to the best of my abilities. What? The sudden goodbye caught Helian Lingzhu completely off guard. You're leaving already, but you're still amnesiac, am I right? And your wounds? Xianxia replied. My wounds aren't healed yet, but I've recovered enough to move around. My memory hasn't returned yet, but remember what I said about being hunted. If I stay here for too long, my enemies might track me to this place. I wouldn't know what to do if either one of you was hurt because of me. So, goodbye, may we meet again someday. He gave them a bow and turned around. Then he weakly but firmly made his way toward the exit. His determination and sincerity stunned even Mo Kangying. Wait! Helian Lingzhu hurriedly blocked Xianxia's path. You might be good enough to move, but it'll be a miracle if you make it to the exit without falling over. And if you do make it to the sandstorm, you're almost certainly going to die. You wanted to repay us for saving your life, right? Helian Lingzhu racked her brains and found the perfect excuse to keep Xianxia around. Well, you won't have to wait until our next meeting. My father was wounded a long time ago, and since the foreign energy invaded his heart, he can only heal very, very slowly. For years he was tormented by the foreign energy, but he didn't even dare to channel his profound energy to alleviate some of his pain. But with your medical skills, you might just be able to help him. she said fervently. If you can save my father, if you can alleviate even just some of his pain, the entire Helian Empire would be in your debt. You would have more than repaid what you owe. Xianxia didn't hesitate for too long. He slowly nodded and said, "Very well, I shall do my best." "Wonderful." Helian Lingzhu was so happy with his change of mind that she broke into a beatific smile. "In that case, ninth senior brother and I will be staying in the Helian Heavenly Palace for another 2 days. 2 days from now, I will bring you to see my father. Until then, you should rest and recuperate." Mo Kangying frowned, but he didn't object to Helian Lingzhu's decision this time. 2 days later, Xianxia flew Helian Lingzhu and Mo Kangying toward the imperial palace. Xianxia continued to feign weakness, but he made it look as if his external injuries had mostly healed. In particular, his face looked as unblemished as it was before he entered the abyss. The effects were obvious. Helian Lingzhu had been captivated by his face for a very, very long time before she finally found the strength to look away. "If you don't mind me asking, First Princess, may I know exactly what type of energy is afflicting your father?" Xianxia asked casually. "Since he is the emperor of an entire realm, I can't imagine that he would be injured easily. Was it the act of a foreign power?" Awkwardness flickered across Helian Lingzhu's face when she heard the question. A few seconds later, she sighed. "It's not really a secret, so I suppose I can tell you about it. In fact, nearly everyone in the Killing Abyss realm has heard the story. The man who hurt my father is called Mo Baiken." Xianxia exclaimed in surprise. "Wait, I'm pretty sure I've heard that name before. Isn't he the abyssal knight Qi Chuan spoke of? Isn't he a native? Why on earth would he hurt your father?" Mo Kangying frowned, and Helian Lingzhu let out a bitter chuckle. "He was a native, and he was a once-in-10,000-year genius of the Killing Abyss realm despite his rather humble birth. Mo Baiken was as talented as he was fearless. Once he ventured into the endless fog in search for the opportunity to break into the next realm. His ambition, however, is even loftier than his talent. He dreams of going to the Pure Land where the abyssal monarch resides together with his wife and his daughters. He wasn't all talk and no action either. He had followed the abyssal knight who offered him the opportunity into the Pure Land and participated in the cruel trials to become an abyssal knight. For several years, we heard nothing from him. Then we heard that the man had died in the trials." Helian Lingzhu let out a long, suffering sigh before continuing. "His daughters were meagerly talented, and they would have been discarded a long time ago if not for Mo Baiken's extraordinary strength and status. Naturally, his clan made an exception for him. Before he traveled to the Pure Land, the imperial family and the clan also swore 1,000,000 vows to do everything in their power to protect his wife and his daughters. But since it was announced, he was dead." Helian Lingzhu took a moment to gather herself before continuing in an unusually raspy voice. "His daughters lost their protection." In other words, both the imperial family and his clan had mercilessly abandoned Mo Baiken's family as soon as they heard that Mo Baiken had died. It wasn't out of cruelty, however. Resources were scarce, and the laws of survival in the abyss were harsh. It had made perfect sense for the two families to give up on his 2 daughters. Without the barriers to protect them from the abyss, both his daughters eventually died to the abyssal dust. His wife committed suicide after losing her husband and her daughters as well. So far, everything he heard was more or less the same as what Kai Weiao had told him. Less than a month after his wife passed away, Mo Baiken returned as an abyssal knight wearing the armor bestowed by a high priest of the Pure Land himself. What happened next needed not be said. It was probably why Baiken had named himself Baiken, Sorrowful Dust, and why he had chosen to become a pioneer. He wanted to die. It was as simple as that. "So Mo Baiken took his anger out on your father?" Xianxia asked. Helian Lingzhu nodded, but quickly shook her head a second later. "Mo Baiken was a righteous man. He could have killed my father if he wanted to, and no one in the entire empire would be able to say he was wrong. But he didn't. The tragedy had been set in stone a long time ago, but it still pained Helian Lingzhu deeply to mention it today. An abyssal knight was someone the Helian dynasty never even dreamed of having. It was supposed to be a light of God that would change the fate of their dynasty forever. Instead, they had ripped that opportunity apart and turned it into a curse of damnation by their own 2 hands. Xianxia glanced at the silent Mo Kangying and asked, "Big brother Mo, I can't help but notice that you share the same surname as Mo Baiken. Are you actually related or?" "We came from the same clan," Mo Kangying replied emotionlessly. "But my clan disappeared a long time ago. Just treat me like any other person." Xianxia smiled. "But you dream of becoming a Kangying Blue Hawk, do you not? I'm sure you wouldn't be satisfied with just staying in your nest. If the Mo clan can produce one Mo Baiken, who can say it won't produce another? Surprised, Mo Kangying shot Xianxia a long look. Somehow, Xianxia had guessed exactly what he was thinking when he called himself Kangying. He might even have figured out that his ambition lay with the Pure Land. The conversation dispelled Helian Lingzhu's gloominess immediately. She broke into a wide grin and said, "Well said, Xianxia. Ninth senior brother is going to think of you as his soulmate now." "HMPH?" Mo Kangying snorted. "I too believe that ninth senior brother will become another Mo Baiken. No, he will be even greater than Mo Baiken." The imperial palace of the Helian Empire wasn't shrouded in sandstorm, but it was grayish dark like all other places. Every inch of space in this land was filled with abyssal dust and actual dust. The palace was mainly forged from granite. Its brownish-yellow color symbolized the empire's dignity, but that dignity seemed pretty frail right now. It wasn't long before Xianxia met the current ruler of the Helian dynasty and the ostensible ruler of the Qilin Abyss realm, Helian Lingzhu. "Lingzhu, Kangying, you've returned." Helian Lingzhu was currently standing at the center of the main hall. As was only natural, his imperial robe and crown were brownish-yellow in color. His gaze was sharp and dignified, but it was missing the natural arrogance a ruler of an entire realm should possess. He shot Xianxia a glance but did not pay him too much attention. "I've made you worry, royal father." Helian Lingzhu stepped forward and bowed deeply toward him. "As long as you're safe," Helian Lingzhu sighed. "If anything, it is my fault you thought it was necessary to put yourself in danger." He then looked at Xianxia and asked, "Is this the miraculous doctor you mentioned in your sound transmission?" Xianxia stepped forward and answered, "Xianxia greets you, your majesty." Helian Lingzhu responded, but his eyebrows were slightly wrinkled. The man before him had a flawless face, unblemished skin, and a pair of eyes that were as dark as the night itself. He could spot almost no abyssal dust on his person either. It was almost as if he had never been touched by abyssal dust in his life until recently. Could he be a denizen of a kingdom of God? He wondered. "My daughter said you were hunted by your enemies and forced to escape into the sandstorm. When you awoke, you discovered that you had lost your past memories. Is that true?" he asked in a critical tone. "Yes, your majesty," Xianxia replied. "It's only thanks to the first princess and brother Mo that I survived." Although the Helian Emperor hadn't released his profound energy, Xianxia knew at first glance that he was stronger than everyone in the God realm, stronger than it was possible for primal chaos to accommodate. Although he wasn't a half-god like Mo Baiken, he was only a hair away from reaching that realm. He was a half-step divine extinction realm profound practitioner, as expected of the abyss. Even the ruler of an unwelcomed corner of the world was greater than even the highest existence in the primal chaos. "The questions can wait until later, royal father. Please show Xianxia the injury you got back then." Helian Lingzhu interrupted and gave Xianxia a gentle push in the back. Her unconscious gesture and words greatly surprised Helian Lingzhu, but he showed none of his emotions on his face and said, "Lingzhu seems to think very highly of you. Your medical skills must be even more impressive than she told me. Come, doctor." Despite what he said, he did not really think that Xianxia could treat him. A half-god had dealt him his injury, and it was far beyond the ability of mere medical skill to cure, to say the least. He only agreed to this because he didn't want to disappoint his daughter. Xianxia didn't waste his breath. He immediately pressed a finger to Helian Lingzhu's wrist and injected a weak amount of profound energy. It quickly circulated throughout the emperor's body one time. 3 breaths later, Xianxia scattered the profound energy and withdrew his finger. Everyone was surprised at how little time it took him to check the emperor's body. Helian Lingzhu asked tentatively, "How is it?" Xianxia answered, "The energy entrenched in His Majesty's heart is incredibly powerful. I can see why he wasn't able to neutralize it. Moreover, the main purpose of this energy is to stall His Majesty's recovery for as long as possible. That is why it isn't life-threatening in the short term." "Do you have a way to treat him then?" Helian Lingzhu asked hopefully. Xianxia smiled. "With my cultivation, of course not, but I can draw it out of your Majesty's heart." "Ah," Helian Lingzhu blanked out for a second before her joy and shock caught up with her. "Really?" Helian Lingzhu and Mo Kangying were also surprised, but their excitement was far tamer than Helian Lingzhu's. In fact, they didn't look happy in the slightest. If Mo Baiken's energy could be drawn out of his heart, then neutralizing it would only be a trivial matter. However, it was the energy of a half-god, an energy that not even the strongest member of the imperial family, the guardian ancestor, could resolve. How dare a mere divine sovereign proclaim that he could do what their guardian ancestor couldn't do? And how will you do this exactly? Helian Lingzhu was scoffing inside his heart, but his expression did not change in the slightest. Ximen Qi replied calmly and confidently, "It will be difficult for me to explain the medical theory and treatment to a layman, but that isn't really important. Your trust is what's truly important for this treatment to succeed." Helian Lingzhu narrowed his eyes but waited for him to continue. "To put it simply, if you would allow me to inject my profound energy into your heart and open 17 injuries in it, then I have absolute confidence that I'll be able to draw out the energy in just 30 breaths." "You bastard!" Mo Kangying was already yelling before Helian Lingzhu could react. "How dare you suggest such an audacious thing, Ximen Qi? Or was that your plan all along? To assassinate His Majesty? To allow one's profound qi into one's heart was to surrender one's life to their hands and to open 17 injuries in one's heart. This was the heart they were talking about. The slightest misstep could cause irreparable damage at best or death at worst. Ximen Qi might as well be plotting the emperor's assassination. Ninth senior brother. Helian Lingzhu hurriedly went over to Mo Kangying and grabbed his arm. "I am sure Ximen Qi's intentions aren't malicious." Ximen Qi wasn't surprised by their reaction in the slightest. He explained calmly, "I've never been to the Helian Abyss realm, so you can be assured that I'm not working for an enemy, not to mention that the first princess has literally saved my life. The reason I came today is to repay her favor. I can assure you that I harbor no ill intentions toward you, your majesty." "He speaks the truth, royal father." Helian Lingzhu hurriedly defended Ximen Qi. "Ninth senior brother and I are the ones who saved Ximen Qi. When he had recovered enough to move, he tried to leave for fear of bringing his enemies upon us. I've personally seen him rescuing a fellow junior brother through a miraculous display of skill as well. That was why I decided to bring him over. Ninth senior brother can testify to this. He was there as well." Mo Kangying couldn't deny that. Ximen Qi added, "I was just speaking from my experience as a doctor, but I completely understand that your majesty would be wary of an outsider you met for the first time, not to mention that it involves something as delicate as your heart. I would actually be surprised if you had agreed to the treatment immediately." Helian Lingzhu still didn't change his expression. He stared at Ximen Qi and asked, "Do you know any other way to treat this?" Ximen Qi replied, "My cultivation is weak, and this is the heart we're talking about. So no, this is the only way I can think of. However, I should have known better than to bring up such a risky treatment to an emperor. Please accept my apologies, your majesty." "As long as you know," Helian Lingzhu replied expressionlessly, but it was clear from his words that he wasn't as cordial as he was before. "Royal father." Helian Lingzhu immediately picked up on her father's anger and tried to defend Ximen Qi again. "I promise you that Ximen Qi is not a bad person. Ninth senior brother and I saw with our own eyes how he saved our junior brother that day. I wouldn't bring him to you if I wasn't so impressed with his skill." "I trust you fully, daughter," Helian Lingzhu said, "but how could you not understand how ridiculous your request is? You're asking me to trust an outsider I met for the first time and whose past I know nothing about with my life. Also," his eyes narrowed into dangerous slits, "I'm really curious why you're willing to entrust your father's life to a guy you've known for less than 3 days. His so-called medical skills probably aren't his only expertise, is it? In fact, I dare say his other skill is much better than his medical skills." "Royal father, Helian Lingzhu couldn't refute his point. "You are correct, your majesty," Ximen Qi replied calmly. In fact, he was so calm that Helian Lingzhu couldn't help but frown in puzzlement. "In that case, I have no reason to stay any longer. This is where we part ways. I shall repay the first princess favor after I've fully recovered." Helian Lingzhu turned away. "Unnecessary. The Helian Empire hasn't fallen so low that we would hold someone's favor over another person's head. The Helian Abyss realm has no place for you, and my daughter is definitely not someone you should covet. If you truly want to repay her, then leave the Helian Abyss realm as soon as possible." "Royal father," Helian Lingzhu wanted to say something else, but Helian Lingzhu was already waving them away. "Kangying, send him away." "At once," Mo Kangying responded. It was at this moment the wind blew and an unruly laugh swept into the main hall. "Ha ha ha ha, Zhua Liancheng of the Boulder Profound Sect requests a meeting with His Majesty." The person might have used the word request, but he was really invading the palace. He even blew his sandstorm right into the main hall. The Helian guards were swept away by the deadly sandstorm and blown far, far away before they could react. "Boulder Profound Sect?" Everyone except Ximen Qi blanched at the same time. "Bastard!" Mo Kangying spun around in fury and mustered his profound energy. Light that looked like solid rocks manifested around both of his arms before he attacked the person behind the sandstorm. A loud explosion ripped the sandstorm apart and shook the surrounding space. Mo Kangying fell from the sky and hit the floor with a loud thud. Although he managed to catch himself, he nearly sank a full meter in the ground, and the floor of the entire main hall was cracked like a spider's web. Mo Kangying wobbled and turned pale for an instant, but his expression immediately turned as ferocious as a hungry eagle once more. "Oh, Brother Kangying?" A tall, muscular man emerged from the dust cloud with undisguised arrogance and ridicule. "It's been 30 years since we last met, and you haven't improved even a little. Didn't you say you were going to become a so-called blue eagle who would soar the skies of the Pure Land one day? You haven't plucked out all your feathers and become a dog for the Helian Empire, have you?" "You!" The anger in Mo Kangying's eyes deepened. His fingernails dug into his flesh almost deep enough to draw blood. The man was the young master of the bolder, profound sect, Xianxia. 30 years ago, they had fought each other to a stalemate. But now Xianxia had managed to overwhelm him in a single exchange. It was at this moment Mo Kangying felt a large hand patting him on the shoulder. Then, Helian Lingzhu stepped forward and stared at Xianxia imperiously. "You're getting ruder and ruder, boy. I can see that your father has neglected to teach you manners." It was an understatement. The slowest person in the abyss could tell that this was a show of undisguised provocation and contempt. Despite Helian Lingzhu's bravado, Xianxia simply didn't think much of him at all. Xianxia had not come alone. He was accompanied by an exceptional young man. He was a peak-divine sovereign of medium stature and an ordinary appearance. Neither Helian Lingzhu nor Mo Kangying had seen this person before. However, he looked perfectly unperturbed despite facing an emperor. He wore a light smile on his face as he looked everyone in the main hall up and down like he was examining an object. He was even more arrogant than Xianxia was, and he was standing beside the young master, not behind him. "Ximen Qi." The first thing Helian Lingzhu did was to send Ximen Qi a sound transmission. "Leave this place as soon as you find the opportunity to do so. This man is the young master of the bolder, profound sect, and he's not someone you want to trifle with. I'll find you later and send you away, so go." Ximen Qi smiled and gave Helian Lingzhu a nod, but he did not move a muscle. Rumble. Clouds of sand kicked into the main hall once more, but this time it was the Imperial Guards. They glared at the two seemingly outnumbered intruders like they would devour them on the spot. However, Helian Lingzhu waved them away and declared, "Withdraw." The menacing auras quickly dissipated along with the sand. Ximen Qi's lips curled into a scornful smirk. He had figured out this so-called emperor's true nature. At first glance, he seemed like a broad-minded and steady man. In reality, he was just a coward who was too afraid to take even the slightest risks. If someone had entered the Emperor Yun city like this, Yan III would have ripped them apart long before word of their demise even made it to his ears. On the way to the Imperial Palace, Helian Lingzhu had briefly told him about the current structure of the Qilin Abyss realm. The Helian Empire was a long-standing dynasty in the Qilin Abyss realm. To this day, it had never been replaced. 20,000 years ago, the sects who were supposed to serve the Helian Empire grew ambitious and began to cultivate their strength in secret. The Helian Empire was complacent because it had never been challenged. By the time they found out about the conspiracy, it was already too late. The three greatest sects under its command had grown to the point where it couldn't just stamp them out with impunity. Knowing that their future literally depended on each other, the three sects actively helped each other out and supported each other's growth as much as possible. The imperial family felt deeply threatened, but they could no longer suppress them openly. However, their attempts to suppress the three sects covertly ended in failure as well. Time passed, and geniuses came and went. However, as if it was scorned by fate itself, few geniuses ever graced the Helian Empire. On the other hand, the three sects grew just a little stronger with every passing generation. Eventually, they got to the point where they could go toe-to-toe with the Helian Empire. Eventually, even those beyond the Qilin Abyss realm learned that the realm no longer belonged to the Helian Empire alone. The power was now shared between one dynasty and three sects. The right to enter the Qilin God realm, a secret realm that opened once every 600 years, no longer belonged solely to the Helian Empire either. It was now enterable by the three sects as well. Several generations ago, all three sects grew into giants that even the Helian Empire must look up to. Each sect was strong enough to defeat the Helian Empire on their own, much less the three of them combined. Mo Baikon's tragedy worsened their situation as a matter of course. It was why the first princess, Helian Lingzhu, was beyond worried for the past couple years. She was struggling to find a way out for the Helian Empire. The three sects were the Boulder Profound sect, the 10,000 Blade sect, and the Fiery Sand sect. The Boulder Profound sect was their leader. Today, Zhu Liancheng had practically invaded the imperial palace and provoked the emperor to his face. It showed just how little they thought of the imperial family. Zhu Liancheng remained unperturbed despite Helian Zhu's firm stare. In fact, he practically grinned at the emperor and said, "It is true that my manners are lacking because I spent most of my time cultivating. I'm nothing compared to Brother Kangying, who surely must have memorized imperial etiquette perfectly since he spends most of his time trying to become your son-in-law." Crack. Mo Kangying literally broke one of his fingers due to how hard he clenched his fist. Everyone knew that he was in love with Helian Lingzhu, and it was true that Helian Zhu was planning to make him his son-in-law. However, Zhu Liancheng managed to twist it into something ugly. "HMPH?" Helian Zhu's voice turned cold. "Speak your business, young master." Zhu Liancheng shot the only unfamiliar face in the hall, Ximen Qi, a glance, but he paid him no heed and said, "Don't you want to know who the guy standing beside me is, your majesty?" "I'm not interested." Helian Zhu wasn't so far gone that he would allow Zhu Liancheng to walk all over him. "Perfect." Zhu Liancheng's grin widened. "Don't say I didn't warn you when the empire changes hands then." He couldn't have stunned them more if he had attacked the emperor there and then. Helian Zhu, Helian Lingzhu, and Mo Kangying blanched at the same time. The empire had lost control of the three sects a long time ago, but they had never been so bold as to speak of a coup d'etat right to their faces, until now. "What is the meaning of this?" This time, Helian Zhu's voice was as cold as ice. "Heh." The man beside Zhu Liancheng let out a low chuckle and spoke for the first time. "I am Ximen Qi. I have come to greet your majesty on behalf of my father." "Ximen." Helian Zhu's eyes contracted into pins. "Are you Ximen Borong's son? Letter 1D5C8, letter 1D4B1, letter 1D41EXT, letter 1D68C, letter 1D442. That's me," Ximen Qi declared arrogantly. "Ha," Helian Zhu sneered. "I thought the Qilin Worship Alliance worships no one but the Qilin God. To think you would lower yourself to become the Boulder Profound sect's lapdog. I've never heard a bigger joke in my life." The Qilin Worship Alliance was the fourth major faction to quietly rise to power in the Qilin Abyss realm. They worshipped the Qilin residing in the Qilin God realm as their god, and their slogan was good enough to draw many powerful profound practitioners and middle or small sects to their side. They viewed protecting the Qilin and the Qilin Abyss realm as their natural duty, and it took them only a short time to accumulate a vast amount of reputation and power. However, the Helian Empire believed that they were still too weak to pay any attention to. They had only popped into existence recently after all. Besides that, the Helian Empire's attention was completely drawn by the three great sects. They just couldn't be bothered to care about a new faction that was focused on religion and seemingly not interested in the power conflict. Clearly, they were wrong. "Oh, no, no, no." Zhu Liancheng wagged his finger smilingly. "You got it all wrong, your majesty. It is not the Qilin Worship Alliance who is going to be our lapdog. It is." He turned toward Ximen Qi and, to everyone's shock, saluted him respectfully. "The Boulder Profound sect will be counting on the Qilin Worship Alliance from now on, brother Xi." "You flatter me, young master." Ximen Qi smiled fondly. "When the Qilin Worship Alliance takes over the empire, we will declare the Boulder Profound sect, the Thousand Blade sect, and the Fiery Sand sect our central pillars. We will bear the same honor as shame as if we are one. Take over the empire." Helian Zhu visibly swayed on his feet. It took him several breaths before he gathered the strength to speak. "Do you understand what you're saying, boy?" Ximen Qi swept his gaze across the magnificent-looking main hall with a pitying look in his eyes. "Tusk, once upon a time, the Helian Empire was so strong that not a single person dared to disobey their word. Even their brick and tile seemed to be infused with the glory of the empire itself. But today, all that is left of your empire is a bunch of wastes of breath. Judging from your reactions, I'm sure you have no idea that our Abyss Qilin realm has gained a second abyssal knight." Helian Zhu was going to let his rage fly when he heard the first half of his sentence, but the second half caused him to swallow it all back down his throat. "What did you say?" Helian Zhu was so stunned that his pupils dilated completely. "A second abyssal knight. Ah, A shuddering whimper slipped through Helian Lingzhu's lips as well. Anxiety like never before caught them in a vice grip. His name is Ximen Qi. Xianxia very much enjoyed the look on Helian Lingzhu's face right now. Do you still remember his name, O lofty emperor? Ximen Qi. It was a name that few people in the Helian Abyss realm were aware of. Mo Kangying growled. He should have died in the endless fog a century ago. Oh no, my uncle managed to come back alive after all, Ximen Qi said slowly. He even broke through his cultivation and became a half-god. After that, he passed the trials of the Pure Land and became an abyssal knight. Can you guess who the one was that recommended my uncle to the Pure Land? That's right. It was none other than the Mo Baiken who hates you so much. Helian Lingzhu visibly wobbled again. Somehow, Ximen Qi's grin became even more arrogant than before. Mo Baiken has willingly become a pioneer and participated in the search for the eternal Pure Land. There is almost no chance he will be able to return. However, his legacy will always be remembered as one of eternal glory and approval from the abyssal monarch himself. It's just too bad that none of it belongs to the Helian Empire. My uncle owes Mo Baiken a big deal, and he has never forgotten about it. He would have done everything in his power to fulfill Mo Baiken's final wishes if Mo Baiken did not return, but my uncle said that Mo Baiken didn't have any wishes. All he has left is an all-consuming hatred that cannot be quenched. Can you guess who the target of Senior Mo's ire is, Your Majesty? At this point, Helian Lingzhu could not even maintain his appearance any longer. His fingers were clenched together, and his gaze was filled with fear instead of imperial dignity. Impossible, Mo Kangying murmured. This cannot be. Helian Lingzhu's mental fortitude was even weaker. She was so panicked that she instinctively tried to grab something that might make her feel better. And of all the things she could have chosen, she actually chose Xian Qi's sleeve. Xian Qi soundlessly pulled away so that Helian Lingzhu would miss. She was too distraught to notice this, however. So what? Helian Lingzhu uttered through gritted teeth. An abyssal knight should be a noble soul who does not allow selfish desires or vendettas to affect their actions. Back then, not even Mo Baiken had done anything to me. Are you seriously telling me that Ximen Qi, an abyssal knight, is going to act as the Helian Worship Alliance's hound? Mo Baiken didn't do anything to you. Ha 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 ha. Xianxia laughed uncontrollably for a moment before catching his breath. If I may ask, how long has it been since the last time you fought, Your Majesty? Have you lived a comfortable life? Well, I'm sure you lived since you haven't died and all, but did you think you might be better off dead sometimes? Xianxia's unrestrained laughter was like a physical jab to Helian Lingzhu's heart. It was so bad that the half-god energy slumbering in his heart jolted awake and engulfed him in a world of pain. However, his physical pain was nothing compared to the one afflicting his soul. To think that the Helian Abyss realm would produce 2 abyssal knights in a mere century, and to think that none of these miracles had anything to do with the Helian Empire. No, it was worse. What was a miracle to others was only a black curse upon them. There is one thing you got right, though, Xianxia continued. Senior Ximen is now an abyssal knight, and he is no longer affiliated with the Helian Worship Alliance. Naturally, it is beneath him to attack you. And frankly, why would he need to do it himself when we alone are enough to deal with your pathetic empire? Helian Lingzhu did his best to control the rampaging energy in his heart and maintain the empire's dignity. You speak a lot, but you still haven't told us why you've come today. Once again, he scanned his surroundings, and once again he confirmed that the 2 men were alone. No one was protecting them or even trailing them in secret. It was contempt of the highest degree. Oh, look at me. The conversation is so pleasant I nearly forgot what I'm really here for, Ximen Qi exclaimed in mock realization but turned serious. On behalf of the Helian Worship Alliance, I'm here to inform you that we are planning to found our empire to the south of the Helian Abyss realm and replace the current dynasty. My father will become the new emperor, and our name will be the Helian Worship Empire. Before Helian Lingzhu could so much as voice his anger, Xianxia added, and the bolder profound sect, the Thousand Blade sect and the Fiery Sand sect will be joining the Helian Worship Empire as its guardian sects. We will be forever loyal to the empire. You boss! Helian Lingzhu raised a shuddering finger and tried to point at the duo. However, his blood was draining from his face at an alarming rate, and he was literally swaying on his feet. Father, Helian Lingzhu panicked and rushed over to support him. The Helian Abyss realm is neither big nor small, but there's definitely not enough space for 2 empires to coexist. I would advise you to disband your empire while you still can. If you wait until we march onto your doorstep, well, don't say I didn't warn you. P-whack! A jet of blood sprayed out of Helian Lingzhu's lips. It flew at least 30 meters before dyeing the floor red. "Father!" Helian Lingzhu screamed in sorrow. Mo Kangying gritted his teeth and appeared behind Helian Lingzhu to catch him. By now, the emperor had completely lost control of the half-god energy wreaking havoc in his heart. Like the devil, it was ramming all over the place and hurting him so much that he was spasming uncontrollably. At the back, Xianxia's lips twitched once. How tedious! Who would have thought that his first major incident in the abyss was a clown show? "You won't succeed," Helian Lingzhu shouted at the duo while supporting her father. "Our empire has ruled the Ximen Abyss realm for countless years. It will not fall to the likes of you." "Is that so? I'm pretty sure that your father and your wannabe husband do not share your sentiment." Liancheng chuckled. "It's fine, though. Considering how much time you have left, your naivety could be a boon instead of a curse." "You... enough." It was at this moment Helian Lingzhu raised his hand and interrupted Helian Lingzhu's retort. "I've always known this might happen, but not so quickly and definitely not from the Ximen Worship Alliance. What else do you have to say? Speak." Helian Lingzhu managed to get back on his feet, but he was still twitching from pain from time to time. It was a pitiful sight. "You will skip this year's Ximen Abyss conference." Liancheng decided to skip the theatrics this time. "There's barely enough Ximen God realm to be shared between 4 factions. 5. Someone has to be cut, and it's gonna be you, of course." Mo Kangying's lungs nearly exploded from sheer fury. "The Ximen God realm was set up by the Abyssal Monarch himself. You dare, we would never break the Abyssal Monarch's rules." Liancheng interrupted him smilingly. "But the right to enter the Ximen God realm has always been decided by strength. If you think you're qualified to participate, then feel free to show your faces. We are more than willing to watch you humiliate yourself." Liancheng exchanged a mocking laugh with Ximen Qi before adding, "By the way, did you know that the Abyssal Knight overseeing this year's Ximen Abyss Conference is Ximen Boyan? Who would have thought, right?" The blows kept coming like it would never end. Mo Kangying was gritting his teeth so hard his gums were bleeding. The Ximen God realm was where the final Ximen lived and the place with the richest amount of earth element. It would not be an exaggeration to say that countless geniuses were made, and bottlenecks were broken in the Ximen God realm. Even Helian Lingzhu, who had been stuck at peak divine sovereign realm for ages, was hoping to achieve her breakthrough in the Ximen God realm. If they lost even the right to enter the Ximen God realm, then it would truly be over for the Helian Empire. "We may be no match for the 3 sects, but who says we cannot defeat the Ximen Worship Alliance?" Mo Kangying uttered. If only for Helian Lingzhu, he would never give up the right to participate in the Ximen God realm without a fight. "You are correct. It has only been a while since the Ximen God Alliance was founded after all. As you say, they may not necessarily be able to defeat the Helian Empire. But you seem to have forgotten something important." Liancheng stared at Mo Kangying with half-lidded eyes. "The Ximen Worship Alliance is backed by an Abyssal Knight right now. With Senior Ximen's authority, it would be all too easy for him to recruit powerful helpers. But the Helian Empire can't do that now, can you? You don't even have enough resources left to raise your warriors. Do you think you can hire even one person who is strong enough to perform well enough in the Ximen Abyss Conference?" Mo Kangying couldn't say anything to that. Ximen Qi joined in leisurely. "If you really want us to step on your faces so badly, then I don't mind giving you an early warning." He raised one finger and slowly bent it like he was crushing an ant. "We've recruited many powerful helpers for this conference, but one of them is enough to crush every single one of you. You and your so-called geniuses are welcome to taste their might, but I give no promises whether you will come back alive." "Are you done?" Helian Lingzhu's face turned as white as a sheet. He was starting to weaken again due to the rampaging profound energy in his heart. "If you're done, then get lost. Please hang on a little longer, Your Majesty." Liancheng taunted mercilessly. "I haven't talked about the lifeline we have specifically prepared for you. If you refuse to listen, you may not get a second chance." Helian Lingzhu wanted to tell Liancheng to fuck off, but the word lifeline resonated deeply with his soul. His chest heaved with exertion, but in the end he uttered, "Speak." Liancheng smiled. "The Helian family was the rulers of the Ximen Abyss realm for many years. If conflict were to arise because of the change of power, people would get hurt, and the entire Ximen Abyss realm would suffer. And if someone was too stubborn to see the light, why, your entire lineage might just be eradicated from existence. It would sadden us deeply to see this happen." He was practically threatening them to their faces, but every person in the hall knew it could very well happen. It would be all too easy for the Boulder Profound sect, the Thousand Blade sect, and the Fiery Sand sect to crush the Helian Empire. Helian Lingzhu was full of sorrow, regret, and hatred toward himself. If he hadn't abandoned Mobiken's family back then, the Abyssal Knight would have become the Helian Empire's strongest backbone. At the very least, the three sects would not have the gall to kick them while they were down. For the sake of my Ximen Abyss realm, and for the sake for whatever dignity you have left, the Ximen Worship Alliance has magnanimously decided to bestow you another option. We will allow you the chance to submit to the Ximen Worship Alliance via political marriage. Before Helian Lingzhu could react, Zhuai Liancheng looked at Helian Lingzhu and said, "As a show of sincerity, the bride-to-be is, of course, the most beloved and reputable member of your family, the first princess." He then half-turned toward Ximen Qi and bowed. "As for the groom, it will have to be young Master Qi. I hope you don't mind, young Master Qi." "Not at all," replied Ximen Qi while staring at Helian Lingzhu with undisguised, no intentional lust. Bang! Every hair on Mo Kangying's head stood on end as profound energy exploded from his body. His eyes looked like they might rip themselves apart from how wide they were. "Oh no," Zhuai Liancheng taunted. "The Emperor and the Princess haven't said anything yet, and it looks like the wannabe husband is about to blow his top." "Wannabe husband indeed," Ximen Qi scoffed in disdain. Buzz, a translucent layer of rocks and soil surrounded Zhuai Liancheng as he gathered his own power. "Do you want to fight me, Mo Kangying? Come on. Of all the dogs of Helian, you are the one I hate the most. There is nothing I would enjoy more than ripping your wings off with my own two hands." "No, don't!" Helian Lingzhu grabbed Mo Kangying's arm tightly. There was no way the Helian Empire could fight against the three sects and the Ximen Worship Alliance at the same time. Their chances of winning were less than zero. So what should they do in this situation? If they fought to the death, the Helian lineage might become extinct, and all that was left of their empire was a mountain of corpses and their history. If they submitted, they would lose all of their dignity, but at least they would be able to preserve their bloodline. This was the lifeline the three sects and the Ximen Worship Alliance offered them, but it was one that was full of shame. At this point, Helian Lingzhu was almost mindless with pain. Even so, he bit his tongue to regain a moment of clarity before staring at Ximen Qi and uttering the most humiliating words of his life. "A political marriage is acceptable, but you cannot be the match. At the very least, it must be Ximen Borong's chosen heir, the young master of the Ximen Worship Alliance, Ximen Hong. Letter 1D5C8, letter 1D4B1, letter 1D41EXT. Letter 1D68C, letter 1D442. Ximen Qi seemed powerful, but there was no way he was Ximen Bohong's heir. If he was, there was no way Helian Lingzhu wouldn't recognize him. There was absolutely no way he would accept his daughter marrying a common son of Ximen Bohong. "Your Majesty!" Voice hoarse, Mo Kangying turned around to stare at Helian Lingzhu in disbelief. His anger and profound energy became distorted as if they had been ripped apart by something. Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi were stunned for a second. Then they burst out laughing on top of their lungs. "Ha ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha!" Zhuai Liancheng literally could not control himself. He was swaying back and forth like he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "What on earth are you thinking, Helian Lingzhu? Are you senile? Do you think that the Helian dynasty is still what it was? The only reason we're even offering you a lifeline is because of your guardian ancestor. Do you really think your first princess even deserves to be young Master Qi's concubine otherwise? Concubine. The concubine of a common son of Ximen Bohong. How dare you?" Mo Kangying could not withstand his beloved being shamed this way, of course. He looked like he was seconds away from bursting a vein. He would have attacked them already if Helian Lingzhu and Helian Lingzhu weren't nearby. "You seem to think it's a dishonor for your first princess to marry young Master Qi, but really it's not." Zhuai Liancheng's tone turned respectful as he said, "When Senior Ximen returned from the Pure Land, he proclaimed young Master Qi to be the most outstanding genius of the entire Ximen Worship Alliance. No, the entire Ximen Abyss realm. He became a peak divine sovereign in less than 360 years. He would have entered the divine master realm if Alliance Master Xi and Senior Ximen hadn't told him to hold himself back and solidify his foundation some more." Ximen Qi accepted his companion's praise with a bright smile. Zhuai Liancheng continued, "Your first princess is a peak divine sovereign as well, but I dare say that two of her are still no match for him." "Ha!" Ximen Qi scoffed before declaring arrogantly, Forget the Helian Empire, there is no one in the entire realm below the Divine Master realm who is a match for me. So tell me again, your majesty, who's the one who is unworthy between me and your daughter?" The blood rose back to Helian Ju's face until he looked beet red. The Helian family was stuck in their ways for so long that the world had literally surpassed them. Even a common son was enough to pressure their whole empire. Heh! It was when the Helian father and daughter were at the bottom of their despair, and Mo Kangying at the height of his anger when someone scoffed under his breath. It was so quiet that it should have been inaudible, but it was such a harsh contrast to the tense atmosphere in the main hall that everyone heard it as clear as day. A certain invisible man had finally stepped into the open and drawn both Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi's attention. "Why are you scoffing?" Ximen Qi narrowed his eyes. As a junior, he had literally driven the emperor of the Helian Empire to illness. The man was angry enough to rip him to shreds, but he didn't actually dare to express anger. It was easily one of the most exhilarating experiences of his life. Then, a nobody had spoiled the mood with his untimely scoffing. The first person to react after the accident occurred was Helian Lingzhu. She had practically teleported in front of Yun Qi to prevent Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi from looking at him. He's just one of my guards. Withdraw now, Yun Qi." "Guard?" Zhuai Liancheng raised an eyebrow. "Considering how soft and tender he looks, I think it's more likely that he's your toy boy than your guard." "You nonsense." "Of course he isn't." Helian Lingzhu was growing incoherent from how panicked she was. She yelled again, "Withdraw now, Yun Qi." But Zhuai Liancheng raised his hand and summoned an invisible wall. "Not until he answers young Master Qi." "What were you laughing about?" Helian Lingzhu was about to cover for Yun Qi once more, but he answered, "It's nothing. I just recalled something funny is all." His mild explanation, one that was completely lacking in fear and practically uncaring, was worse than a direct provocation considering that this was supposed to be Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi's greatest moment right now. Zhuai Liancheng smiled casually yet dangerously. "What's so funny about it? Care to share it with young Master Qi and I?" "Heh!" This time, Yun Qi did not bother to hide his disdain. He scoffed out loud and said, "What? Are you so inept that you can't even read between the lines? I was laughing at two foolish, ignorant, and embarrassing clowns, of course. Can you guess who they were?" Helian Lingzhu turned deathly pale in an instant. Even Mo Kangying was so stunned that he temporarily forgot his anger. Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi froze, but only for an instant. Their mouths split into a dangerous grin that was half-part playful and half-part excited. After all, who doesn't like face-slapping an arrogant idiot? Who doesn't like playing with a free toy? "Yun Qi," Helian Lingzhu's voice was clearly shaking. "Have you gone mad?" There, he must have a death wish," Mo Kangying muttered in a helpless, despairing tone. "Ha ha ha ha, good, very good." Zhuai Liancheng glanced Yun Qi up and down a couple of times. He was about to say something when suddenly, a well of jealousy sprung inside of him. Most denizens of the abyss were exposed to abyssal dust all the time. It was why their skin often looked gray and rough no matter their power level. On the other hand, Yun Qi had a pair of eyes that looked like black abysses, eyebrows that looked like swords, hair that looked like the embodiment of night itself, and a face that looked like it had been carved out of marble. There were some very faint marks on his face. It was clear that he had only recently recovered from some sort of injury, but instead of marring his handsomeness, it made him look devilish instead. In short, Yun Qi was the best-looking pretty boy he had ever seen in his life. Jealousy led to hatred, and hatred led to the desire to destroy Yun Qi even if they didn't know each other until now. Helian Lingzhu sucked in a deep breath and said, "He." The emperor wanted to say that Yun Qi was no guard, and he had absolutely nothing to do with the Helian Empire whatsoever. However, Helian Lingzhu had already called him her guard earlier, so denying it now would only make things worse. So he said, "This boy had just come to the Qilin Abyss realm a while ago, and we don't know where he came from. He is Lingzhu's guard, but we haven't registered him officially. One thing for certain, his words and actions have nothing to do with the imperial family. You are free to deal with him as you please." Helian Lingzhu's eyes widened. "Fa, get lost now, Yun Qi." Helian Lingzhu ignored her and shouted. Yun Qi scoffed inside his heart. Now he acts like he's an emperor. Get lost to where?" Ximen Qi shook his head. "He insulted me and the young master of the Boulder Profound sect. Do you really think we're going to let him go?" Helian Lingzhu gritted her teeth. "Young Master Zhuai, young Master Ximen, Yun Qi is just an outsider who knows nothing about the Boulder Profound sect or the Qilin Worship Alliance. If one does not know any better, then how can they be held responsible? I will exile him from the Xilen Abyss realm right now. I promise you he won't show himself before the two of you anymore. Ha 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 ha. Zhuai Liancheng burst out laughing. I cannot believe how much you're defending this outsider guard of yours, First Princess. You must love your toy boy a lot. Does he drive you up the wall all day and night? Brother Kang Ying. I'm so sorry, but I think the woman you've been buttering up this whole time has been used up by this pretty face. Ha ha. Zhuai Liancheng was going to laugh some more when he abruptly recalled that Helian Lingzhu was going to be Ximen Qi's woman. He hurriedly swallowed his laughter. Helian Lingzhu was the first princess of Helian. To say that she had never heard such insulting words until today would be an understatement. Shaking like a leaf, she uttered, You. Mo Kangying knew better than anyone that Yun Qi and Helian Lingzhu had only known each other for a while. Despite this, he couldn't help but turn beet red with shame and anger. It was because he also knew that Zhuai Liancheng's taunts weren't completely off. After all, he had seen with his own eyes Helian Lingzhu crossing the line multiple times to befriend and defend Yun Qi. He took a step forward and tried to say something, but once again Yun Qi spoke in a lazy voice. So, what are you two going to do to me, clowns? If his previous words could barely be interpreted as an act of ignorance and stupidity, now he was literally taunting them to their faces. It was so direct that Zhuai Liancheng stopped smiling and glared at him coldly. Do you really want to die this badly? Yun Qi grinned and crossed his arms before his chest. I don't understand. The two of you have the face of a waste of breath, and you're using your background to oppress others instead of your own power. Not only that, one of you has the gall to claim himself invincible under the divine master realm. If you're not clowns, then who are? Helian Lingzhu caught Yun Qi's sleeve instantly. Her eyes were trembling, and she was so shocked she couldn't say a word. Mo Kangying had spun around to stare at Yun Qi as well. Although the young man was courting death, it was a fact that he was spitting facts he had always wanted to say but could not, doing things he had always wanted to do but could not for various reasons. Heh. Heh. Ximen Qi was truly angry at this point. Not even God can save you now, boy. Is that so? Despite Ximen Qi's bloodlust, Yun Qi wasn't afraid in the slightest. He even stepped toward the young man and taunted, How are you going to kill me then? Oh right, Yun Qi raised his eyebrows. You are a so-called, unrivaled, profound practitioner under the divine master realm. Since we're both divine sovereigns, I'm sure you can kill me as easily as turning your palm, right? Yun Qi was about 1/6 of a meter taller than Ximen Qi, so it became clear who was looking down on who when he got close. Even if that wasn't the case, the undisguised scorn and disgust in his eyes made it clear that he truly thought that Ximen Zai was an embarrassing clown from the bottom of his heart. Ximen Qi's expression suddenly turned ugly. Even worse, he actually felt like he was being pushed back by Yun Qi. He had no idea that the young man before him is the emperor of an entire universe. Ximen Qi's smile slowly became warped as anger got to him. He shook his wrists a little and said darkly, This is the first time I meet someone who wants to die this badly. Since you came to me yourself, it would only be right that I grant you your wish, right? As soon as he said this, rock grew out of his fingers as he made a grab for Yun Qi's throat. If it hit, he would tear out his throat for sure. The duo were literally a step away from each other, and Ximen Qi had attacked without warning, so no one could react to the sudden attack in time. Even Helian Lingzhu could only muster a horrified scream. Bang! It sounded like 100 thunderclaps exploding at the same time. There was a flash of withered yellow, and a man was thrown into the wall. Helian Lingzhu abruptly stopped screaming, and Zhuai Liancheng's taunting smile froze on his face. It was because Yun Qi was still standing where he was with a mocking smile on his face. Forget moving, not even his hair was kicked up by the impact. Zhuai Liancheng spun toward the silhouette who was rolling down the wall with difficulty. It was none other than Ximen Qi. Ximen Qi's head and knees hit the ground at the same time. He looked like no better than an air-dried toad right now. He should have gotten back to his feet right away if only to avoid looking so ugly, but he remained in this position for breaths, as if he had suddenly fallen into an outrageous nightmare. Zhuai Liancheng was stunned. Helian Lingzhu, Helian Zhu, and Mo Kangying were stunned as well. When Ximen Qi finally came back to the earth, he stared at Yun Qi and screeched, You! Whoosh. A gale blew, and a shadow swiftly dominated Ximen Qi's vision. Boom bang! Yun Qi kicked him right in the face and shattered his protective profound energy in an instant. He was immediately thrown back into the wall once more. Such was the impact that that entire section of the wall crumbled into pieces. Xianxia had literally kicked his entire head into the wall, leaving only the lower half outside. Xianxia leisurely walked over to Ximen Qi and planted his foot on the young master's face. He then started rubbing back and forth while taunting, "You must be joking. We're both divine sovereigns, and yet you couldn't even take a hit from me, a mere guard. This is what you call unrivaled under divine master realm? Am I crazy, or are you crazy? I take back my words. To call you a clown would be an insult to clowns." Helian Lingzhu's mouth was agape. She couldn't say anything for a long time. Even Helian Lingzhu had forgotten the pounding pain coming from his heart. The one who was stunned the most by this outcome was Lian Cheng, however. He knew better than anyone how strong Ximen Qi was. Ximen Borong had even asked him to suppress his breakthrough so that Ximen Boyun could strengthen him with the miraculous spirit herbs he brought back from the Pure Land for years. The claim that Ximen Qi was unrivaled in the Kilin Abyss realm wasn't a lie. Ximen Boyun was the one who claimed he was unrivaled under Divine Master. And yet, how on earth did Xianxia, another peak Divine Sovereign, manage to trounce him like he was nothing? GRRK. A muffled groan came from inside the wall, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Boom! The wall abruptly exploded, and Ximen Qi finally managed to escape the sole of Xianxia's shoe. Blood poured profusely down his face and the back of his head as he staggered back to his feet. His eyes and his face grew increasingly manic when he wiped his face and stared at the blood on his palm. He couldn't feel any pain because his heart was going crazy with humiliation and the desire for violence. It was so overwhelming that he felt like every cell in his body was burning alive. He was Ximen Qi, son of the Alliance Master of the Kilin Worship Alliance and the future prince of the Kilin Worship Dynasty. His talent was so outstanding that even Ximen Boyun gave him his unreserved praise. Assuming he continued to grow as quickly as he did, it wasn't impossible that his father might choose to make him the crown prince instead of his older brother. However, Xianxia had sent him flying and even stepped on his face. He was just a peak divine sovereign, and he was just a princess guard that hadn't even caught his notice until now. He had never been shamed this badly. He could die 1,000,000 times and never forget this shame. "You walking garbage, son of a bitch, slave." He howled the vilest curses he knew through gritted teeth. "I'll kill you with my own 2 hands. Seriously." Xianxia only stared at him like he was looking at a pitiful idiot. Ximen Qi's senses at that moment. He literally didn't care where he was or how he was doing. The earth beneath his feet exploded as he pounced toward Xianxia. His profound aura was as chaotic as a screeching demon. At the same time, a rock spear about 3 meters long appeared in his hand. It was surrounded by yellow light and roaring like a dragon. "The dragon-catching spear?" Helian Lingzhu exclaimed in shock. To think that Ximen Borong would give the spear to Ximen Qi instead of his heir, Ximen Hong. It showed just how much Ximen Borong valued Ximen Qi. The profound storm Ximen Qi conjured at this moment stunned everyone present. It was much stronger than any divine sovereign had any right to be. He even looked like a poor man's divine master at that moment. If they weren't sure before, they now knew that the claim that he was unrivaled under divine master wasn't a lie. Of course, it was equally true that Xianxia had surprised him twice, but perhaps it was simply because he underestimated the young man. Now that Ximen Qi was unleashing his true power, and even using the dragon-catching spear, Xianxia was probably going to. All sorts of emotions flickered across everyone's face. Everyone except Xianxia. The young man was so calm it was unthinkable that he was less than a second away from being skewered by Ximen Qi. In response to Ximen Qi's deadly attack, Xianxia raised a burning left palm. Literally, his hand was on fire and made a grab for the spear. His action caused Ximen Qi to scream savagely, "I'll destroy your arm first!" Clang. The resulting clash was loud enough to rip eardrums and deafen the soul itself, but the object that was destroyed wasn't Xianxia's palm, but the profound light surrounding the dragon-catch spear. The crimson flame easily tore through the powerful yellow light like it was paper. The draconic roar abruptly turned into a painful scream. Then, the profound light surrounding it vanished completely. Ximen Qi's already warped face instantly turned twice as distorted as before. His hateful pupils also dilated into pure, unadulterated horror. Xianxia's palm finally made contact with Ximen Qi's spear, and an unimaginable amount of power flowed through the spear and shook his entire body. Earth profound energy was the most defensive profound energy in the world, and stone the best defensive element of them all. However, Yun Qi's palm had torn through both the dragon-catching spear's energy and Ximen Qi's protective energy with almost no resistance whatsoever. A blood-curdling scream broke through the air, and his right arm exploded into a shower of blood and gore. His right palm especially were just bones with blood on it. Yun Qi easily sucked the dragon-catching spear into his hand. "Destroy an arm, you say?" he sneered. "That's a great idea." He brought down the weapon and speared Ximen Qi right through his right chest. It pinned the young Alliance master to the ground like a speared fish. Not done yet, Yun Qi dropped his foot on Ximen Qi's head and drove it into the underground once more. "I honestly cannot believe that you're the son of the Helian Worship Alliance." Yun Qi let out a low chuckle. "How did your seniors brainwash you? What did they tell you to give you the gall to challenge the Helian imperial family and my first princess?" Helian Lingzhu's heartstrings were immediately pulled by his words. Young Master Qi." It was only WNO Zhuai Liancheng finally recovered from his shock. Grim-faced, he channeled his profound energy and made a dash for Yun Qi. However, Mo Kangying appeared just in time to stop him. Bang! Letter 1D476, letter 1D4CB, letter 1D40BXD, letter 1D680, letter 1D45C, letter 1D5C6, the two divine masters clashed and pushed each other away. After he landed on his feet, Mo Kangying uttered while glaring at Zhuai Liancheng venomously. "To think that a fourth-level divine master would attack a divine sovereign. Have you no shame at all, Zhuai Liancheng?" Zhuai Liancheng paid him no heed, however. He had been glaring at Yun Qi this whole time. Yun Qi removed his foot from Ximen Qi's head and kicked him in the torso. The young master and his spear skidded all the way back to Zhuai Liancheng. The divine master hurriedly caught his companion. Ximen Qi's right hand was just bones. His beloved dragon-catching spear was speared through his chest, and his skull must have fractured in at least a dozen places. He seemed completely unconscious, though it was impossible to say if it was because of pain or humiliation. Zhuai Liancheng felt his scalp crawl. He had never, ever imagined that Ximen Qi could look this bad, much less witnessed it until now. He raised his head and stared at Yun Qi again. "Who are you?" "I already told you. I'm the first princess guard, Yun Qi," Yun Qi replied expressionlessly and emotionlessly. To think an animal from the Helian Worship Alliance would dare to covet the first princess. He would have died 10 times over if I wasn't afraid that he would pollute Her Highness' eyes. Helian Lingzhu. Zhuai Liancheng's gaze turned darker. Mo Kangying clenched his fists tightly as if someone had finally spoken what he wanted to say a long time ago. "Impossible," Zhuai Liancheng uttered coldly. "There is only useless trash left in the Helian Empire. There is no way you can be one of them." "Heh," Yun Qi sneered. "Young master of the Boulder Profound sect, how is it that you still don't realize that you're a self-made idiot?" "Actually, forgive me. Of course an idiot wouldn't think they're an idiot. They wouldn't be idiotic if that was the case." "You!" Zhuai Liancheng was beyond furious, but this time he barked a retort immediately. Yun Qi continued, "Am I wrong? Your founder probably wasn't even born yet when Helian took over the Helian Abyss realm, and countless generations have passed since that day. What you saw is but the tip of the iceberg. Do you really think a handful years of decline is enough to diminish generations of accumulation? If you're not a clown and an idiot, who are?" Helian Ju's eyes swam. If he wasn't the emperor of the Helian Empire, he might have thought that Yun Qi was telling the truth. Zhuai Liancheng's complexion changed again and again. Yun Qi was just a divine sovereign, and yet he was looking at him, a fourth-level divine master, like he was an ant. There was even a tinge of sympathy mixed with his scorn. Did he and everyone else truly underestimate the Helian Empire? It was at this moment Mo Kangying declared, "You should leave, young Master Zhuai. You wouldn't want your friend to lose his arm, would you?" Zhuai Liancheng glanced at Ximen Qi and finally made up his mind. Before he left, he uttered, "I will remember this, Helian. You best be ready to face the Helian Worship Alliance and Senior Ximen's wrath. We shan't be seeing you off." Helian Zhu finally found his voice again. "HMPH." Zhuai Liancheng picked up the Ximen Qi and the dragon-catching spear. Then he left the imperial palace without ever looking back. When he first came, he was so loud it was as if he was afraid that someone would miss his arrival. Now, he was leaving with his tail between his legs, his companion unconscious and blood all over his robes. Countless people must have witnessed this scene. God only knows how the rumors would spread. Are you hurt, Yun Qi?" Helian Lingzhu took a few steps forward as if she wanted to touch Yun Qi, but in the end she didn't leave Helian Zhu's side. It was clear that she was looking at Yun Qi completely different from before, however. Words could not describe the myriad emotions swirling behind her eyes. Xianxia smiled. I'm perfectly unharmed. You have nothing to worry about, Your Highness. Xianxia. It was at this moment Helian Lingzhu asked in an imperious voice, Who are you? I already told you. I lost my memories after I suffered grievous injuries. I do not know where I come from, Xianxia answered frankly. If you know nothing, then what gave you the gall to act in such a way? He spoke loudly and imperiously despite clutching his heart. Did you know who you just beat up today? Are you aware how big a tragedy you'd bring to my Helian? Heh! Xianxia chuckled and turned around to face Helian Lingzhu directly. While crushing a blood-stained rock underfoot, he curled his lips into a mocking grin and said, When two juniors barged through your doorsteps and stepped all over Helian's dignity, you couldn't wait to shine their boots with your tongue so they may step on it some more. I'm the one who took back your dignity for you, but you're lording over me like I'm the one pissed on you instead. Truly, you are the most impressive emperor I've ever encountered in my life. Xianxia didn't hold back on his taunt at all. Helian Lingzhu's complexion immediately turned beet red. You! Helian Lingzhu pointed a shuddering finger at Xianxia as his heart pounded painfully in his chest once more. It was so bad he nearly blacked out there and then. Mo Kangying should be defending his humiliated emperor right about now, but this time he chose to remain silent. Father! Helian Lingzhu hurriedly pressed Helian Lingzhu's hand down. Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi were stepping all over our dignity. It is also true that Xianxia is the one who trounced them and won back our pride. Helian Lingzhu retorted. Who cares about Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi? Like we need a brat from God knows where to stick his nose into our business. What's really terrifying is the factions behind. It's true that Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi are trash. Xianxia interrupted Helian Lingzhu mercilessly. But they're the ones the Qilin Worship Alliance sent to discuss important matters, such as the Qilin God Conference and the literally fucking replacement of your dynasty. What do you think it means, Emperor? Helian Lingzhu's face stiffened. By now, Xianxia was staring at him with undisguised scorn. At first, I wondered why two juniors would dare to barge right into your palace and act like they own the place. The answer quickly revealed itself, though. With such a spineless, excuse me, boneless emperor like you on the throne, two juniors are enough to convey, well, anything. Now I understand why the first princess had to work herself to the bone to protect the future of the empire. Xianxia's words were like a spear straight through Helian Lingzhu's weak spot. His face twisted, but this time it wasn't because of the pain from his heart. He flung Helian Lingzhu's arm away and yelled, And what do you know about my difficulties, huh? You're a mere BR, junior who doesn't even know who he is or where he comes from, like you have the right to accuse me of anything. Helian Lingzhu's reaction painted a steep contrast against Xianxia's scornful smile. This would be a perfectly normal sight if their reactions were reversed, but it wasn't. It was comedic to put it mildly. Zhuai Liancheng mentioned a guardian ancestor. Xianxia wasn't even looking at Helian Lingzhu anymore. I'm willing to bet that he's a half-god. There were no true gods beyond the Pure Land and the Sixth Kingdom of Gods. It was unlikely that a divine limit realm profound practitioner would exist in this remote location either. Therefore, divine extinction realm was probably the limit. Helian Lingzhu's squirming eyeballs were all Xianxia needed to see to know that he was right. It cannot be easy to eliminate a half-god. The fish may die, but the web is going to be tattered at best. That is why the best-case scenario for the Qilin Worship Alliance and the three sects is to force Helian to surrender of their own accord. For the imperial family, your best way to handle this is to act strong and bluff as much as possible. The stronger you pretend to be, the more the Qilin Worship Alliance and the three sects would be wary of you. After all, you were a dynasty with over 100 eras of accumulations. Anyone would think twice if the bluff was done properly. Unfortunately, Xianxia shook his head in derision. Helian's current emperor is a boneless, bloodless coward who spent all his day quaking in fear of tomorrow. You must have told your enemies everything about your accumulation all the way down to the color of your underwear, haven't you? That is how you got to the point where two juniors could toy you like taking candy from a baby. Just shameful. From the start until the end, Ximen Qi and Zhuai Liancheng had never treated Helian Lingzhu with any respect. It showed just how little the Qilin Worship Alliance and the three sects thought of him. Even their juniors held zero respect for the so-called emperor. As if that wasn't shameful enough, the Qilin Worship Alliance is literally ordering you to step down for your throne and give up your empire. And what did you do? You demand that your daughter be wed to their heir, not their common son? Like, are you kidding me right now? Ha 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 ha. Xianxia laughed boisterously. It's no wonder that the empire is in such a state. Mo Kangying just barely managed to control his facial expression. Yuan Qi was shaming the emperor to his face, so why was he feeling satisfaction instead of anger? You! Helian Lingzhu trembled like a leaf in the wind. He was an emperor, and not even during his most humiliating days had he been humiliated so. Worse still, every word the youngster spoke had hit the bullseye. Do you really think I wouldn't dare to kill you? Kill me? Yuan Qi side-eyed him and took 2 steps toward Helian Lingzhu. Do it then. I dare you. Another emperor would have acted already. Helian Lingzhu. He actually withdrew his arm a little. Ximen Qi was shockingly powerful as a divine sovereign, and yet Yuan Qi had trounced him like a babe. By now, even the dumbest person would have figured out that Yuan Qi most likely belonged to a country far higher than the likes of the Helian Empire or the Ximen Worship Alliance. Add to the fact that his looks were extraordinary and he acted like he was an emperor himself. Did he hail from a kingdom of God? The thought had crossed Helian Lingzhu's mind a long time ago. A person's nature was imprinted in their bones, and unfortunately, Helian's nature was that of an utter coward. Naturally, Helian Lingzhu would never dare to lay a hand on Yuan Qi, not until he figured out his background at least. Helian Lingzhu felt like his chest was about to explode. He hadn't been this angry even when Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi were jumping all over his face. You did win my empire some dignity, however temporary it might be, so I won't kill you yet. Helian Lingzhu mouthed the perfect excuse as he forced down the rampaging energy in his heart. But just because I'm not going to kill you doesn't mean that the Ximen Worship Alliance won't. Rather than provoking me, you should be searching for a way out of the grave you dug for yourself. Now get out of my face, and do not even entertain the idea that the Helian Empire will try to protect you. I've already shown you my greatest mercy by not escorting you to the Ximen Worship Alliance this instant. Clap, 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 Yuan Qi praised loudly as he clapped. As expected of your majesty. Nothing you've said so far has exceeded my expectations one bit. You don't need to worry about my safety, though. After all, the Ximen Worship Alliance and the 3 sects aren't nearly as stupid as a certain someone. I highly doubt they'd dare to touch me before investigating the nobody who absolutely trounced their so-called genius without a scratch. Yuan Qi literally didn't exist in this universe until days ago, so the Ximen Worship Alliance and the 3 sects' efforts were destined to end in failure. Naturally, this would make them even warier of him. If Helian Lingzhu could put 2 and 2 together, surely they could as well. Also, the Ximen Abyss Conference is near, and the Ximen Worship Alliance is planning to replace your dynasty as soon as it's over. There is little chance they would start something during such a sensitive period. In fact, Yuan Qi smiled dangerously, they will probably try to recruit me as they investigate me. Helian Lingzhu's mouth visibly twitched at this. It was at this moment the wind blew loudly outside. The next second, a tall, muscular man and a bunch of imperial guards rushed into the main hall. It was the crown prince of the Helian Empire, Helian Lingzhu. Father, Lingzhu. He landed beside Helian Lingzhu and Helian Lingzhu and inquired about their health in a worried voice. Are you all right? I'm sorry I'm late. I came as soon as I heard that someone had barged into the palace. Yuan Qi sneered. Zhuai Liancheng and Ximen Qi were anything but inconspicuous when they announced their arrival, and there was no chance the crown prince hadn't heard about it until just now. This could only mean that this piece of shit had hidden himself until the duo had run away. He truly was Helian Lingzhu's son. It was a literal miracle Helian hadn't been annihilated ages ago. Everything's okay now, brother, Helian Lingzhu said perfunctorily. Even the kind-hearted woman couldn't be bothered to pretend that she meant her consolation. It showed just how little she thought of her own brother. Good. Helian Lingzhu let out a long sigh of relief when he suddenly noticed Yuan Qi. After observing his profound aura closely, he put on a stern face and asked, Who are you? Yuan Qi paid him no attention whatsoever. He said indifferently, Since the emperor doesn't welcome me in his empire, it would be impudent of me to stay any longer. Thankfully, I have repaid at least a sliver of the favor I owe the first princess. He shot Helian Lingzhu a long look before saying, Take care. He then turned around and slowly walked toward the exit. Yuan Qi. Helian Lingzhu took a step forward, but she was murmuring instead of calling out his name like before. Oh right, I almost forgot. Yuan Qi suddenly paused in his tracks and said, The character, Ju means an incomplete jade. I'm sure it's your seniors who came up with the name, and they were subtly warning you not to be overly secure in your throne, and that even the moon waxes and wanes at times. However, this is obviously at odds with your way of conduct. Instead, I would suggest that you change your name to Funuo, meaning a promise that will last for eternity. Who knows, the change might actually save you Helians and ensure that you will last for another eternity to come. Heh. A cold smile later, Xianxia finally left the main hall and took off into the sky. Who the hell do you think you are? Helian Lingzhu exploded in anger. How dare you criticize my father's name, men? Shut up! Helian Lingzhu cut him off with an angry shout of his own. It was such a surprise that Helian Lingzhu hurriedly bowed his head and could not say anything for a long time. Helian Lingzhu's eyes kept chasing after Xianxia's back. She would not look away until he was completely gone from her eyes. A long time later, she bit her lip as if she had finally made up her mind before chasing after him. Surprisingly, Helian Lingzhu didn't stop her this time. Hem. He slumped little by little as he clutched his heart. By now, he was on the brink of blacking out. Considering his temperament, it was a miracle that he managed to hold on until now. Helian Lingzhu hurriedly supported him. Funyuo, he muttered as he stared blankly into the distance. He was actually ruminating over the name Xianxia left behind very seriously. A promise that will last for eternity, an incomplete jade. Did my given name really alter the Helian's fate? At the back, Mo Kangying could not stand this unsightly behavior any longer and said emotionlessly, "Why don't you flip the two words around, your majesty?" Fu Niu to Niu Fu, coward. Helian Lingzhu's eyes bulged when he finally made the connection. The energy he just barely suppressed until now instantly flooded his heart like a broken dam. P-whack! Letter 1D44 to letter 1D5CF, letter 1D4 1EXT. Letter 1D5C7T, he spat out another jet of blood and finally blacked out. Everywhere was yellow and gray as Xianxia flew away from the imperial palace. He still hadn't acclimatized to the abyssal dust yet, but the uncomfortable, sticky feeling was decreasing by the hour. As for its invisible corruption, he could barely feel it anymore. The Ximen Abyss realm, the Ximen God realm, both realms were the places where the earth element of the entire abyss was most active. It was almost like destiny, or perhaps it was destiny. Countless thoughts were flying through his mind right now. When the heretic god had tossed the earth heretic god seed into the abyss back then, was it really just because he didn't want his successor to own the complete heretic god profound veins and overload primal chaos? It was thanks to her extraordinary affinity with the dark element that the heaven-smiting devil emperor had noticed that something was wrong with the abyss. As for the heretic god, he possessed an unusual affinity with all the elements: water, fire, thunder, wind, earth, and dark, except light. Of course, his dark affinity must be inferior to the heaven-smiting devil emperor's. But if he really thought about it, the chances he would notice that something was wrong with the abyss should be way higher than the heaven-smiting devil emperor's. He could not have investigated the abyss, even if he noticed the abyss transformation a long time ago. After all, not even the heaven-smiting devil emperor could make it down. In that case, did he toss the heretic god seed into the abyss because that was where Xianxia's thoughts ended because he was almost out of time. He muttered under his breath, 3, 2, 1. Young Master Xianxia! Helian Lingzhu's urgent cry rang from behind. When Xianxia came to a stop, Helian Lingzhu had already caught up to him. She looked a little red with urgency. "Have you come to see me off first, princess?" Xianxia asked while smiling at her. Instead of shaking or nodding her head, Helian Lingzhu responded with a question of her own. "Are you really going to leave?" "Of course," Xianxia replied. "I have seriously offended your father, to put it mildly. Any other emperor would have imprisoned or killed me for what I did. Naturally, I couldn't stay any longer. Speaking of which, do you blame me for treating your father that way, first princess?" Helian Lingzhu shook her head without hesitation. "I know better than anyone what my father is. Your words were humiliating, but they were also the truth. If only we had someone who could force him to do the right thing at the start, then maybe we wouldn't be." Her voice turned sorrowful, and Xianxia's eyes took on a tinge of sympathy. "The reason you traveled to the endless fog back then, was it because of the Ximen Abyss conference?" "Yes," Helian Lingzhu nodded. "The Ximen God realm is a sanctuary of cultivation, breakthrough, and opportunity for all profound practitioners who cultivate earth-profound arts. It is vital to the growth of the current and future generations. Back then, the Helian Empire was the indisputable ruler of the Ximen Abyss realm. The imperial family was the one who got to decide who entered the Ximen God realm and who didn't. It was the sects who had to do everything in their power to curry favor with the imperial family so that their outstanding juniors could get in. Those glorious days were long gone and beyond reach. After the Boulder Profound sect, Thousand Blade Sect and Fiery Sand Sect rose to power. The Helian Empire slowly, but surely lost their absolute control over the Ximen God realm. It's how the Ximen Abyss Conference came to be. The point of the Ximen Abyss Conference was to decide how the Ximen God realm was divided among the 4 factions. The ranking decides how many people a faction gets to send into the Ximen God realm, and the participants were the juniors below 600 years old. The Helian Empire must have ranked last for the past couple generations then, Xianxia said directly. You are correct. Helian Lingzhu's sorrow deepened. When the throne was passed down to my father, it was like he had completely given up on changing the empire's fate. He completely stopped all pursuits for improvements and sought only ease and comfort. One could say that he was like a mouse before the 3 sect masters. Then, Mobaikin happened, and he became more despondent than ever before. No matter how the 3 sects tested him, his only response was tolerance and more tolerance. Even if they crossed the line, he only dared to criticize them behind their backs. From being the masters of an entire realm to being satisfied with just a small corner of the world. It was both tragic and despicable. Helian Lingzhu continued. As of late, the Ximen Worship Alliance had been growing stronger and stronger, and he had advised my father multiple times that the Helian Empire might lose the right to enter the Ximen God realm completely if a new major faction were to rise to power. If that happened, the Helian Empire would lose their future permanently. However, my father said that the Ximen Worship Alliance is only focused on religion and not ambition. Even if they did rise to power and become a threat, the 3 sects would do the dirty work for them. His reason was that the 3 sects would tolerate a 5th faction sticking their nose into their control over the Ximen God realm even less. My father has always been like this. He always seeks comfort and stability, and he always leaves the initiative in another's hands. Worse, when the opportunity of a lifetime actually fell into his lap, he ordered the men to stop protecting Mobaikin's wife and daughters, claiming that the empire cannot set a bad precedent. Her eyes were filled with tears as she confessed her true feelings to Xianxia, all of them. She had never felt such a strong desire to confess even when she was facing Mo Kangying, the senior brother she relied on and trusted the most. In fact, I had heard the news that the Ximen Worship Alliance might be joining the Ximen Abyss Conference a month ago. However, my father refused to believe me, citing the same reason we didn't defeat the Ximen Worship Alliance when we could. My brother, the Crown Prince, usually just does whatever my father says, so the only thing I could do was to seek a breakthrough. If the Ximen Worship Alliance did join the Ximen Abyss Conference, and if I succeeded in becoming a divine master, then the worst-case scenario could have been prevented, or so I thought. Tears started rolling down her cheeks freely. But reality was so many times worse than I could have imagined. I literally can't see a future for the Helian Empire anymore. She was tired. She had done everything she could to save her country, but things just kept getting worse no matter what she did. Xianxia raised a hand and evaporated the tears on her cheeks with a bit of crimson flame. Its warmth crept into her bitter, cold heart despite her despair. The outcome may not be as bad as you imagine, Xianxia said smilingly. At the very least, you do not need to give up the Ximen Abyss Conference as your enemies demand. A surprised Helian Lingzhu whispered, Is there really hope? The Ximen Worship Alliance is not the upstart we thought they were. They're a great power that could make even the 3 sects submit to their will, not to mention that the Abyssal Knight witnessing this Ximen Abyss Conference hails from the Ximen Worship Alliance as well. I just don't see any hope that we can change this. He looked into Helian Lingzhu's eyes and asked, Do you trust me? Helian Lingzhu faced his clear, mirror-like eyes and nodded without hesitation. Of course I do. In that case, I want you to do everything in your power to convince your father to take part in the Ximen Abyss Conference. After that, you can just leave it to me. Xianxia was warm and collected. No one thought that the Helian Empire could produce a miracle, and yet he made it sound like the impossible was but a trivial matter to him. Helian Lingzhu's lips parted. For a moment, she couldn't say anything. I'm not doing this just to repay your favor, of course, Xianxia said honestly. I'd like to enter the Ximen God realm as well. The Ximen God realm was created by the Abyssal Monarch himself, and an Abyssal Knight would be overseeing the Ximen Abyss Conference the entire time. It would be insanely risky to try and sneak into the place. Therefore, entering the Ximen God realm the proper way was possibly his only viable option. Helian Lingzhu didn't ask why Xianxia wanted to enter the Ximen God realm or how he was going to defend the Helian Empire's right to enter it. She simply looked away from his eyes and whispered, You have no feud with Ximen Qi, and yet you had deeply humiliated him and almost destroyed him. Did you really do it just to repay me? She was an imperial princess, and yet for as long as she could remember, she could never raise her head high in front of the three sects. It was always humiliation after humiliation over and over again. No one, not even her own father, had ever defended her like this until Xianxia showed up. Not completely, no, Xianxia answered. Those three words were all it took to spark endless imagination. An unspeakable joy bloomed inside Helian Lingzhu's heart, and she almost couldn't stop her joy from showing on her face. After she finally managed to push down her emotions, she looked up at Xianxia's face and declared unblinkingly, "Okay, I will do my best to change my father's mind. If he refuses to listen, then I'll speak with my ancestor. Also, you're not going to leave any more, right?" Xianxia nodded. In fact, Xianxia had a backup plan even if Helian Lingzhu failed in her persuasion. One of the reasons he shamed Helian Lingzhu mercilessly a while ago wasn't because he wanted to shame him. A spineless emperor like Helian Lingzhu wasn't worth his spit even if he was a half-god. But because he wanted to anger the man. The energy Mo Baiken left behind was afflicting Helian Lingzhu's heart. Naturally, the emperor wanted to avoid being angry as much as possible. Zhuelian Cheng and Ximen Qi had done half of his work for him. After he added insult to injury, Xianxia could tell that he was on the verge of completely losing control. It took him all of his power just to keep Mo Baiken's energy at bay. One more push was all it would take to tip him over the edge, so he did just that. He had purposely gifted Helian Lingzhu the words Funyuo. When he figured out the word's true meaning, he was almost certainly going to black out from rage. As Xianxia had personally inspected his heart earlier, he knew that the emperor could not take too much excitement, and today had just been one excitement after another. By his estimate, the last push should be enough to drive him to the verge of death. He would literally die if he did not receive treatment. And who would he seek out during his most desperate moment? At the beginning, the emperor had rejected him unquestionably. But now there could be a real negotiation. Before Helian Lingzhu left, she exchanged sound transmissions with Xianxia and gave him a place to stay. It was the outer hall she usually cultivated in, near the border of the imperial palace. In the distance, Mo Kangying wobbled as if he wanted to dash over to Xianxia and say something. However, he quickly withdrew to his hiding spot and several breaths later left in silence. Xianxia turned away, and the warmth and tenderness in his eyes turned into ice. This was the third day since he came to the abyss. The first step he had been planning before he came in had been achieved sooner than he anticipated. The Killing God realm was most likely the place where he could attain the complete heretic god profound veins and finally break through his limits. Assuming that everything went well, then he would truly become the heretic god of this era. 1. Subtext. Indeed, I did it only because the motherfuckers indirectly drove Mo Baiken to the surface and killed He Ling, and speaking of which, don't think I'm done with your empire. Your father will die, your brother will die. Mo Kangying will probably die a heroic death so as not to raise suspicions. And I will control your whole empire so that one day I can destroy your world. And you'll never even realize I've been manipulating you this whole time. Alliance, your injuries are so severe that your flesh and blood will need to be remodeled. Thankfully, the Killing God realm's opening is still 3 weeks away, which is just enough time for you to heal and make it. The Killing God realm opened only once every 600 years. Considering Ximen Qi's talent, it would be a huge, irreversible loss for him and the Killing Worship Alliance to miss it. Who's the one who hurt you, Kier? The man who asked the question possessed a stern face, a deep voice, and a natural aura of intimidation. Every word he spoke was like a giant rock that kept adding to the pressure on one's chest. Ximen Boyan was a newly ascended abyssal knight. He was ranked 982nd and named the Imperishable Rock Owl. Ximen Qi was still screaming in pain, so Zhu Liancheng answered the question for him. Senior Ximen, the one who hurt young Master Qi, is called Xianxia. He claims to be a humble guard of the first princess, but I'm certain that he isn't part of the imperial family. I'll be shocked if Helian Lingzhu grows a pair of balls, humphed Ximen Borong, Alliance Master of the Killing Worship Alliance. Everyone knows just how much of a coward Helian Lingzhu was. So long as you did not threaten his life, he was the kind of man who would swallow his teeth even if you punched him in the face. Xianxia. Ximen Boyan skimmed through his memories expressionlessly. However, he could not recall anyone named Yun who was worth a damn. Father, uncle, I must have my revenge. Ximen Qi rasped even though his mouth and throat were filled with blood. That was how much he hated the guy. He wasn't a spoiled young master. On the contrary, he had often risked his life during his cultivation. It was just that the humiliation Xianxia dealt him was beyond anything he had ever experienced. Calm your mind and rest. You'll want to be at your best when you enter the Killing God realm, Ximen Qi consoled him. We will deal with the man who hurt you ourselves. He then looked at Zhuai Liancheng and asked, Who is this Xianxia and where did he come from? He's a peak divine sovereign. That is all I know, Zhuai Liancheng replied honestly. What? Ximen Qi and Ximen Qi looked up in astonishment, and their reactions didn't surprise Zhuai Liancheng in the slightest. His reaction was easily 100 times greater than theirs as he had been present at the scene. Both men looked at Ximen Qi at the same time, and the young master did not shake his head. The shame and humiliation in his eyes deepened. I am telling the truth, Zhuai Liancheng said seriously. Not only that, I'm certain that the name Xianxia is just a lie. There is no way someone who can defeat young Master Qi so thoroughly is of common origin. That is why I believe that he hails from a kingdom of God. It was like lightning had struck the room. A short silence later, Ximen Qi asked, Does this Xianxia know who you are? He does, Zhuai Liancheng nodded, but he was never bothered by it. In fact, he was intentionally provoking us into reacting. Plus, he and young Master Qi had never met, and yet he still acted with utter impunity. It's like he isn't afraid of our alliance or the bolder profound sect at all, as if he knows that he's greater than all of us. Do you have any evidence that supports the fact that he might be from a kingdom of God? Ximen Qi asked solemnly. His appearance, Zhuai Liancheng answered immediately. He has black eyes and pale skin. There is almost no sign of erosion on his body whatsoever. Ximen Qi and Ximen Qi exchanged a glance. Their faces grew even sterner than before. Zai Tian Yao, Ximen Qi ordered. I want you to look into this Xianxia and his relationship with the Helian imperial family immediately. Do not stir up anything until you've found an answer. Father, Ximen Qi looked disgruntled. We are allied with the three sects, and we have uncle. We do not need to fear that slave. HMPH? Ximen Qi fed coldly. Your enemy has grievously wounded you even though he knows of your identity. So he's either so stupid he doesn't realize that death is upon him, or he knows he has nothing to fear from you. Tell me, do you think that the former could defeat you in any capacity? Your anger may lead us to our doom, Kier. Our esteemed guest should be arriving any moment now, Ximen Qi said solemnly. It is up to him whether we can become the vassal state of a kingdom of God. If we miss this chance, then we won't ever get another one. That was why they must keep the ship steady no matter what. It doesn't matter who Xianxia is. It can wait until we've received our guest and completed the Killing Abyss conference. Zhuai Liancheng subconsciously bowed his head when he heard the words esteemed guest. It was because that man was so lofty that he didn't even have the courage to look up to him. The bolder profound sect, Thousand Blade sect and Fiery Sand sect had been entrenched in the Killing Abyss realm for years, and their overall strength far exceeded the Killing worship alliances. Despite this, they still bowed their heads to the Killing Worship Alliance and even supported their efforts to found a new dynasty. Naturally, it couldn't be because of a single Ximen Qi. Xianxia didn't leave the imperial palace in the end. Instead, he stayed in the private hall Helian Lingzhu had arranged for him. The room's decor was fairly simple. There were dozens of types of cultivation profound formations in the room. They were all used for meditation and cultivation. For 4 days straight, Xianxia had sat on his bed without moving a muscle. His eyes were closed, and he wasn't circulating his profound energy. He was simply holding up his right hand to gather a small amount of abyssal dust. That's right. He could gather abyssal dust now. Although the amount of abyssal dust he gathered was insignificant at best, it was still a feat that would have shocked the entire abyss. It was common knowledge that abyssal dust could only be resisted or isolated, depending on one's cultivation level. It was a law and power that existed beyond the convention and could never be mastered by anyone, not even if they were a high priest or the abyssal monarch himself. In fact, no one except the ancients even knew that the law of nothingness was a thing. His sound transmission jade suddenly twitched, and Xianxia opened his eyes. He let out a long sigh as the tiny cloud of abyssal dust he was maintaining scattered into the surroundings and vanished. From the day he discovered that he could interfere with abyssal dust, he had been careful not to go overboard with his research. Despite this, he had made an incredible amount of progress in just a few days' time. Although his mastery over abyssal dust at the moment was weak and frankly pathetic, It was a miracle that was beyond his expectations. He wondered what lay at the end of this miracle. It was Helian Lingzhu who sent him a message. As expected, Helian Lingzhu had agreed to participate in the Ximen Abyss conference despite the pressure from all sides. To ensure that Helian Lingzhu would keep his promise, Helian Lingzhu had even spoken with the guardian ancestor himself. In fact, the guardian ancestor could very well watch over them when the Ximen Abyss conference happened. In secret, of course. The guardian ancestor of the Helian Empire was called Helian Kunlun. He usually sealed himself under the Earth Palace and stayed out of court matters to extend his life as much as possible. He acted solely as the Helian Empire's final weapon. He was nearing the end of his life even though he was a half-god. Every time he fought, he was basically diminishing whatever lifespan he had remained. The only reason he had lasted until now was because of his undying will to protect the Helian lineage. When Helian Lingzhu told him that the Helian Empire was about to welcome a new dynasty, and that they were going to lose even their right to the Ximen god realm, well, it was a miracle he hadn't passed away then and there. In 2 or 3 more days, Helian Lingzhu should completely lose control of Mo-Baiken's energy and be in serious danger of dying. Mo-Baiken hated Helian Lingzhu so much that he had injected his energy into his heart with the intention of tormenting the emperor forever. Naturally, it was incredibly difficult for Helian Lingzhu to eliminate it on his own, nor could it easily be treated from the outside. Not even Helian Kunlun could save him. His power was enough, but he lacked the skill. Only someone much, much stronger than a half-god could do it. There was nothing Helian Lingzhu feared more than death. The emperor would definitely seek him out when he was on his last ropes. As expected, his sound transmission jade shook again 2 days later. This time, Ximen Qi froze it without listening to its contents and slowly left his room. He also withdrew his aura to the point where he was near invisible. He was Emperor Yun, master of primal chaos. Like hell, he would allow anyone to summon him as they pleased. Helian Lingzhu could probably use the fear and pain anyway. Who knows, it might even change his personality for the better. Ha! Ximen Qi slowly explored the imperial palace after leaving Helian Lingzhu's private hall. It was very different from the palaces in his memories. For one, there was no hustle or bustle. Everyone who wasn't talented enough would be abandoned like trash, and those who were talented enough were safely confined in the Earth Palace to protect them from abyssal dust. Cultivation was literally their whole youth. Therefore, everyone who could walk in the open was an expert. Ximen Qi's spiritual perception told him that the weakest profound practitioner in the palace was a divine tribulation, and even then he could not imagine them staying out for long. There were no plants or water. Even the deadest planet in the god realm would still be 1,000 times more lively than this place. Still, Ximen Qi felt nothing for their plight. This was the fate of all who lived in the abyss from the moment they were born. Of course, they were welcome to change their fates. He didn't even have a problem with them trying to destroy another world to save themselves. It was just unfortunate that the world they chose to destroy was his. He would be good to himself and his own world. That was Xia Qingyu's one and only request to him, and so he would. He would never, ever break a promise to her again. A few hours later, he thought that Helian Lingzhu was ready. Right when he was about to head back, he suddenly felt an unimaginable chill that shot up from his spine all the way to his skull. He stopped in his tracks. It didn't fade away even after a long, long time. As his affinity with abyssal dust grew, its limitations on his spiritual perception had greatly decreased as well. As a result, he was far more perceptive of his surroundings than all others at his level. The piercing cold he just felt was an aura that had swept across the whole area like it was nothing. The most terrifying aura he had ever sensed besides Jia Yuan was Mo-Baiken, and this one was clearly far, far stronger. The aura only lingered on him for an instant. It made sense. He was a lowly divine sovereign after all. Ximen Qi's expression didn't change, and he casually turned around and walked back to the imperial palace as if nothing was amiss. His heart was heavier than it was before, however. With God Ash, he could go toe-to-toe with Mo-Baiken for a short time, but the owner of this aura, God Ash, would amount to absolutely nothing before him. Kai Waya once said that Mo-Baiken was a late-stage second-level divine extinction realm profound practitioner. He was below average among his fellow abyssal knights, but he was definitely not the weakest. The pressure this person gave off, though, he was willing to bet that they were in the 5th level of the divine extinction realm. The Ximen Abyss realm was a frontier land that no one cared to visit save perhaps Earth element profound practitioners. So why were they here? I hope they're just passing by. I'm one step away from entering the killing god realm. The last thing I need is an uncontrollable variable. Xianxia withdrew his aura even more, but he had just taken a few steps when the silhouette of a man crashed into his sight. Literally, it was impossible not to notice the man considering his bearing and aura. He was a young man with an exceptionally handsome face. He had long, unblemished black hair that was tied together using a silver ribbon, and it reached all the way down to his face. He was wearing an odd silver robe made of a substance that Xianxia couldn't recognize. When he walked, it actually rippled like liquid mercury. When Xianxia tried to focus on his clothes, he felt himself turning dizzy all of a sudden. He quickly broke out of the trance and regained clarity of mind. At the same time, he frowned deeply. This man wasn't a divine master. He was a half-step divine extinction realm profound practitioner. The terrifying aura swept past Xianxia again, and this time it didn't move away. Xianxia immediately figured out that the master of the terrifying aura was protecting the silver man before him. What was even stranger than his clothes was his eyes. His eyes looked like they were shrouded in a layer of mist, and if you looked past it, you would find another layer of mist, then another, then another. It was as if a whole world was hidden behind his eyes. Not only that, his eyes were actively tickling one's curiosity so that the victim would fall deeper and deeper into the abyss. Before they knew it, they would have lost all of their reason and rationale. Xianxia looked away immediately. It was clear that soul energy was the man's primary cultivation, and his status was just as unusual. It was a shame Xianxia lost interest in him almost all too quickly. It was because the man's behavior and gaze were all too familiar to him. His footsteps were slow and relaxed. His eyes were half-lidded like he was half asleep. Silhouettes, strange rocks and buildings flitted through his gaze, but they couldn't linger in his eyes for even a second. It was as if everything in the world, be it living or dead, did not deserve to enter his eyes. His lips were curled into a sneer. His eyebrows were scrunched together in a way that made it clear he felt only disdain and disgust for this world. He acted like he was a god who had descended to the earth to inspect his lowly mortals, and his expression was practically saying, "This world is beyond lucky that I have deigned to bestow it with my presence. The reason I'm averting my eyes is because every person, every object, every brick and every tile in this world would only stain my nobility." Heh, here we go again, Xianxia thought to himself while relaxing. It was a human's nature to desire what they were lacking and brag about it. This silver man must have been so insignificant and oppressed in his own world that he had no choice but to descend to a lower plane to satisfy his sick desires and craving for glory. If he really was a super genius or a highly prestigious person, he would not need to come here and search for people to kiss his feet. People like him existed across planes and even universes, it would seem. Xianxia had long since tired of his ilk. As long as he avoided drawing his attention, there was no need to worry about him. He was fairly sure this guy had nothing to do with the killing god realm. He stood too high on the totem pole to care about such things. Xianxia withdrew his gaze and slowly walked away. Unfortunately, he once again came to a stop just 10 breaths later. It wasn't because of the silver man, though. Her eyes looked like the culmination of the brightest stars and moons. A radiance beyond the wildest dreams and imaginations flowed within her eyes. She was the only glass in this tainted universe, the one star that brought hope even in the darkest nights. Such were her eyes that he noticed her looks only a second later. She was dressed in white, frilly clothes that were tailor-made to fit her figure. It was of the highest quality and tailorship. However, there was no doubt in Xianxia's mind that it was the girl who accentuated her clothes to an impossible degree, not the other way around. She walked alone in this withered, yellowish palace. Her gait was nothing special, but somehow she reminded him of a butterfly dancing in a garden of flowers. Her long, black hair fluttered in the wind like obsidian stars. He could tell she was still a teenager. Although her veil was covering half of her face, the skin that wasn't covered up looked as white as the first snow and as lustrous as a fruit. Even her fine, delicate eyebrows were overflowing with a kind of spirit. He couldn't see her full countenance, but what little he saw, impossibly, she was as beautiful as Shenzai and as unforgettable as Kai Yinger. Xianxia forced himself to look away. Ever since he accepted Kai Wei's full memories, the way he measured others was becoming like hers as well. To put it simply, he could look through their eyes and unearth the color of their souls. Kai Wei's warnings felt like yesterday. He had never forgotten his objective, or rather, his mission for coming to the abyss either. That was why he made sure to wrap his heart and soul in a million shackles. His external emotions might fluctuate, but no one could ever see through his eyes and into his soul. And yet, that girl had pierced through all of his mental defenses and left a shiny lake of stars in his heart. And she wasn't even trying. If he left it alone, she would surely become another attachment he could never let go. That was why he mustered his willpower and ruthlessly carved it out of his mind. Anything that could awaken his emotions and interfere with his will should not exist. It wasn't long before he walked past the girl. She no longer existed in his vision. Then Xianxia's footsteps slowed for a third time. It was because the girl was headed straight for the silver man from earlier. A storm kicked up inside his head. The girl looked 18 years old at most, and yet her aura marked her as a half-step divine extinction realm profound practitioner. The gulf between divine master realm and divine extinction realm was the gulf between a mortal and a half-god. Countless profound practitioners of the abyss had been stumped by this gulf for eternity. Knowing this, it was shocking that this girl, a teenager no less, had already reached this realm. Her talent, her cultivation, her beauty, her eyes. Not only that, she looked perfectly unstained by abyssal dust. No, he was sure she wasn't even touched by it. This is her first descent to the mortal coil, Yi Qing thought. What kind of background, love, and overprotectiveness did it take to nurture such a flawless girl in the abyss? Could it be? He slowed down even more. For the first time since that terrifying power showed up, he soundlessly released his spiritual perception. The silver man had reminded him of someone. Back at Flowing Cloud City, when he was still a cripple, there was a man named Xiao Quanjian from the Xiao sect. Despite the difference of their plane and background, he saw no difference between the silver man and Xiao Quanjian. Both his and Kai Wao's experience agreed on this regard. Here in this realm, the silver man did not need to conform to the rules and shackles he normally bound himself with. He could let loose to his heart's content. Therefore, his acumen would most likely suffer a nosedive. After all, why would a noble one like him need to be careful about anything in this lowly realm? With that in mind, how would he react when he encountered the girl? The silver man must hail from a lofty place. He was guarded by someone even scarier than Mobiken after all. The Killing God realm was right around the corner as well. Logically speaking, this was the worst possible time to start something of XCOM his sense of security, and value began waging a great war inside his mind. As expected, the silver man saw the girl. The man had been acting like a divine emperor inspecting his subjects this whole time, but the moment he laid his eyes on her, his feet suddenly skidded to a stop. His expression suddenly turned as stiff as a statue, and his eyes widened more and more until his eyeballs threatened to fall out of their sockets. He had witnessed countless beauties in the past, and his harem alone numbered several thousand. So far, everyone he saw in the Killing Abyss realm only elicited disgust in him. But when he saw the veiled girl, it was like he had lost his soul in an instant. The girl eyed the silver man out of the corner of her eyes for an instant before looking away. During the short time she entered this mortal coil, she had witnessed such a reaction too many times already. It made her realize just how spectacular her appearance was. The sandstorm and the abyssal dust had disrupted her spiritual perception to an extent, and her aunt wasn't willing to give her any guidance whatsoever. So, she stayed in the sandstorm almost like she was in a fit of pique until it could no longer affect her spiritual perception anymore. Only then did she walk out of it and enter this mortal palace known as the Killing Abyss realm. Due to her body, she had always been guarded by her protectors with the utmost care. Moreover, she spent most of her time in the Pure Land, so this was the first time seeing the world around her. She was extremely curious, to put it mildly. Throughout all this, the silver man's gaze was affixed to the girl's body like glue. He had no idea how ugly he looked right now, and he didn't care. It wasn't until the girl was far, far away that he finally regained clarity of mind and realized that he had literally bent himself 108 degrees to stare at the girl. To think that a girl like that could exist in a place like this. His voice was 1/3 excited, 1/3 surprised, and 1/3 longing. He was also stretching and curling his fingers unconsciously. I knew it was a good idea to get out once in a while. Who would have thought that a gem like her would exist at such a place? You're not a denizen of the Killing Abyss realm, are you, girl? The refined voice had started behind her and ended in front of her. It was because the silver man had moved to her front. His eyes were misty, and his lips were curled into a perfect smile. His elegant posture was mysterious yet dangerous, and countless women had swooned to his face. He was holding a folding fan with a silver tassel at the end. To say he was handsome and attractive would be an understatement. In fact, the silver man was far prouder of his looks than his background. The girl stopped in her tracks but did not watch him closely. She answered naturally, "I do not hail from here, yes." Her voice was so indifferent it was practically emotionless, but it was still beyond melodious. The silver man smiled. "What a coincidence. I'm not from here either. Since we're both alone, why don't we travel together?" "No, thanks." The girl rejected him immediately and got ready to leave. "Why don't you give me a chance to say my piece first?" The silver man shifted again, and this time he was only 10 steps away from her. His eyes shone with barely restrained lust as he opened his folding fan and fanned himself. "This world is full of dangerous and malicious people. You may be in danger if you travel alone." The girl ignored him, but just when she was prepared to leave, her crescent eyebrows suddenly scrunched together into a tiny frown. The folding fan was rippling with malicious soul ripples, and it was soundlessly invading her soul sea. Not only that, she had seen this before. The warm moons in her pupils turned into frigid stars. She rarely said harsh words in her life, but this time she said, "You better get out of my way or else—" The threat was left unspoken. "Or else what?" The silver man laughed. He knew that a girl like her could not possibly hail from an ordinary background, but so what? No matter what her background might be, there was no way it could be greater than his. He continued to wave his folding fan while walking closer and closer to the girl. At this range, the soul ripples he was releasing were visible to the naked eye. "This is our first meeting, and I feel like I've seen the star of my life. I would regret it forever if I do not make your acquaintance, and that's all I want, to be your acquaintance." His voice was infused with soul ripples as well. In fact, everything he did could capture a person's mind without a trace. Even if he was facing an enemy who was in the same cultivation realm as him, he was absolutely certain that he could disrupt their heart and soul. It was because the soul art he cultivated was the greatest soul art in the abyss bar none. He raised his hand. He was trying to grab the girl's wrist. It was at this moment a weak but extremely foolish presence cut in between the two of them. "Get lost!" yelled Xianxia Qi while blocking in front of the girl. Flames were rising from his body and blocking the silver man's gaze and aura. "Did you not hear her? She told you to get out of her way." The silver man squinted and examined Xianxia Qi once. Then his lips curled into a faint sneer. He wasn't angry or annoyed that someone had interrupted his fun. He was just looking at a foolish clown with sympathy and malicious playfulness. While watching the silver man intently, Xianxia Qi said to the girl behind her, "You should be careful, big sis. He's a lecher who clearly has malicious designs for you. I'll buy you some time, so run now." The girl's lips parted slightly. Did he just call me big sis? If life is just about the first meeting, then perhaps I would not have shattered you. Perhaps you would not have hated me for eternity. A hero saving a damsel in distress was an extremely cliché and contrived plot, but one could not deny its usefulness, especially against an innocent girl who had never experienced the world before. The purer the soul, the easier it was to leave an impression, and first impressions were the hardest to remove of them all. Meanwhile, the silver man was treating this as a humorous spectacle. The young man was a peak divine sovereign and probably an expert in the Helian abyss realm, but before him, he was no more than a clown who was begging for his face to be slapped. He had absolutely no idea who he was facing. The outside world truly was fun and interesting. "And where did you come from, worm?" the silver man asked. He did not need to do anything to show his disdain for the young man. "Worm?" Xianxia's smirk was even more disdainful than his, however. "As expected, only a worm will see others as worms. You stink so bad I can smell you from 5 kilometers away." The corner of the girl's lips curled up for an instant. Xianxia had never lost a verbal war, and insulting people came to him as naturally as breathing. But for the girl who had grown up in a perfectly insulated environment, it was something new she had never experienced before. "I have no idea you can scold people like this." The silver man's face darkened a little. Before he could say anything, Xianxia increased the intensity of his flames and said, "Now get lost. Your heart is evil and you use your power to abuse others. If there is one person that should be removed from the abyss, it would be someone like you, a person whose heart is overflowing with filth." As if just noticing that the girl was still standing behind him, Xianxia then looked back and added a note of urgency to his voice. "What are you waiting for? Go ha 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 ha." The silver man laughed. Do you know who you're talking to? Xianxia barely suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. Even their lines were exactly identical. You're telling me to get lost. When the silver man folded his fan, strange ripples started appearing around his face. Would you believe me if I told you that one finger is all I need to make you kneel on all fives until you die? Is that so? The flame in Xianxia's hand grew to 3 meters in length. And if you don't get lost, I'm afraid you won't even get the chance to kneel anymore. The girl stuck out her tongue in secret, but she clearly wanted to see where this would go. Very well. The silver man raised a finger and bent it down. Xianxia's knees immediately fell toward the ground. The girl frowned and formed a sword at her fingertip. But before she could finish, she abruptly discovered that Xianxia had somehow stopped his knees from bending. Not only that, he was slowly rising back to full height. Surprise bloomed across the girl's face. Did he just resist the man's soul pressure as a divine sovereign? The same astonishment flickered across the silver man's features before it was replaced by a frown. This time, the strange light in his eyes was several times greater than before. Kneel, crack. The horrible sound didn't come from Xianxia's knees, however. It was the sound of him breaking a tooth from exertion. His body was shaking, his face was contorted, and sweat was pouring down his head like a waterfall. It was clear that he was in deep pain. However, both his legs and his spine remained as straight as an arrow. His crimson flames remained lit as well. In fact, he even had the strength to move his hand backward and summon a gust of air to push the girl away. Get away now, this man is extremely dangerous. The girl. Once again the silver man was speechless, but this time it was anger that overtook his features. A violent light flashed through his eyes. But right before he could increase his soul energy, a shredding noise suddenly pierced through the air. Shred. A blue line appeared between the silver man and Xianxia, severing space itself and the soul pressure. Clutching his chest and shuddering violently, Xianxia backed away from the silver man and shot the girl a look of deep shock. The silver man, too, staggered back and lost focus for an instant. However, he quickly recovered his playfulness after staring at the girl for a bit. Not bad. To think you can cut my soul threads with your sword intent. Not bad at all. This time, it was the girl who stepped in front of Xianxia. A sword light jutting out of her fingertip, she muttered to herself and the silver man, punishing evil is also part of the experience. Evil? Heh heh, ha 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 ha. The silver man straightened his back as he laughed arrogantly. Do you know who I am, girl? The girl answered. Your surname is Meng. Xianxia, the silver man's smile stiffened for a moment before morphing into a frown. How did you know? The way you channel your soul energy is very similar to Meng Jiangxi. Your external auras are pretty similar as well. The girl answered indifferently and directly. Therefore, the two of you probably related in some way. For the first time, the silver man blanched. He completely lost control of his expression when he heard the name Meng Jiangxi. You, the silver man's voice changed. You know my younger brother? Younger brother? The girl's starry eyes twirled as a way to verbally attack the silver man occurred to her. Meng Jiangxi would be very unhappy if he heard the way you addressed him. To an outsider, her threat seemed completely powerless. However, the silver man visibly shuddered like she had hit him. Oh, I know. The girl suddenly remembered something. If you're Meng Jiangxi's older brother, then your name must be Meng Jianzhu. Words could not describe Meng Jianzhu's feelings right now. His lust, his arrogance, his confidence, they all vanished under a veneer of absolute shock. Who are you? Who are you? It was at this moment a gray silhouette suddenly descended from the sky and landed right next to the silver man. At the same time, an indescribably terrifying aura enveloped them all. Xianxia immediately stared at the gray silhouette. The terrifying aura he had sensed earlier had come from him. The gray silhouette was an old man with short hair, long beard, and a stiff face. He was wearing a gray robe. He was none other than the silver man's protector. However, the protector should not have appeared here. Moreover, he was withdrawing his pressure as best he could as if afraid he would disturb something or someone. Meng Jianzhu wasn't expecting the old man to show up at all. He was just about to say something when the old man grabbed his arm and said, "We need to go." What? WH. Shut up, let's go. Boom. There was an explosion of profound energy, and the duo vanished from sight in just the blink of an eye. The shockwave caused by a divine extinction realm profound practitioner should have bowled them over, and yet it didn't so much as touch Xianxia or the girl. It was as if the old man had carefully controlled his outburst. Xianxia secretly withdrew his gaze. The old man was a profound practitioner beyond even Mo Baiken, but at that moment, he had acted no different from a whipped dog. He snuck at the glance beside him. He thought that this was the case. Not only was she divinely beautiful, she was obviously sheltered and overprotected to the extreme. Knowing this, there was no way she wouldn't have a protector of her own. The reason he hadn't sensed anyone at all was simply because the protector was powerful beyond measure. He literally wasn't strong enough to even sense her. "Are you all right?" the girl asked, as she stared at the reckless yet determined man with her all-too-beautiful eyes. She wondered if she should treat his soul injuries. After all, that was Meng Jianzhu's soul pressure he had withstood. He might have resisted it somehow, but he must have been hurt, right? Xian Qi got up to his feet. Despite his pale complexion, he replied evenly, "I'm fine. It looks like you would have been fine even if I hadn't meddled in your business. Thank you for your help, big sis, and goodbye." He shot her one last smile and left just like that. The girl subconsciously lifted her hand a fraction. He's leaving just like that? Not only did he not turn around, he was moving faster and faster. It wasn't long before they couldn't sense each other's auras anymore. "Auntie, this man is really, really, really special," the girl said after she finally found the word she was looking for. "You've always warned me to be careful of everyone around me because you are certain that they all harbor ulterior motives. But that man, he did everything he could to help me to the point where he injured his soul, and yet he had left without a word after the danger was over. Forget ulterior motives, he didn't even ask for my name. I knew there are still a lot of good people in this world," she declared with a bright smile on her face. There were many things she could have said about the incident, but it was as if they didn't matter to her in the slightest. Instead, she chose to talk about Xian Qi. "The world has 100 facades and humanity 1,000 faces," an ephemeral voice rang in her heart. "It is unsurprising that you would meet someone that does not conform to conventional wisdom once in a while. More importantly, one meeting is hardly enough to form a conclusion. Letter 1D4A, letter 1D463XT, letter 1D4B8, letter 1D45C, letter 1D440. "I get it," the girl replied smilingly. "There is no point in staying here. You should leave." The girl thought for a second. "But Auntie, the Ximen God realm where the last Ximen rests is about to open, and it only opens once every 600 years. It would be a shame if we missed it." "Do whatever you like," the ephemeral voice said. This was her trial, so it was up to her to make her own decisions. Right now, the girl was being pulled in every direction by every new thing she saw. It would be counterproductive to suppress her curiosity. Of course, one must bear the consequences of their actions, and she had already warned the girl that the restriction around the Ximen God realm was set by the abyssal monarch. This meant that she would not be able to help her if she chose to enter the Ximen God realm. It wasn't until Xian Qi was far away, that he finally allowed his expression to return to normal. Almost immediately, his eyebrows slowly scrunched together into a frown. Meng. The surname immediately reminded him of the divine regent whose surname was Meng. The Dreamweaver Kingdom of God, the dreamless divine regent, Meng Qi. The profound practitioners of the Dreamweaver Kingdom of God are experts in cultivating the soul. Kai Weiao's description of the Dreamweaver Kingdom of God had left quite the impression on him. Combining all the clues, it would seem that the silver man named Meng Jianzhu was the son of the dreamless divine regent. Knowing this, it made perfect sense that he would be protected by a half-god. In that case, that girl who had scared a half-god into running away with his tail between his legs, the girl had mentioned another name, Meng Jianxi. Meng Jianzhu was the son of the divine regent, and yet he had looked extremely wary when he heard his younger brother's name. This meant that Meng Jianxi was most like the name of the Dreamweaver divine son himself. The girl had mentioned his name without any concern whatsoever. It was as if she was just mentioning a peer. In that case, she must be. He suddenly stopped in his tracks when he recalled someone Kai Weiao had told him before. Speaking of which, most of the information I managed to pry loose from Mobaiken's crumbling soul was either some of his deepest memories or common knowledge that permeated his subconscious. Everything else was so blurry that I wasn't even able to identify the imprint of the 4 high priests, something he should be able to identify at a glance. However, his memory of the Heaven-Breaker divine daughter was especially deep. In fact, it was deep enough for me to make out an almost distinct outline. "Are you suggesting that he and the Heaven-Breaker divine daughter were?" "Of course not. Mobaiken may be an abyssal knight, but there's no way he would be qualified to interact with a divine daughter. He merely caught a glimpse of her when she was traveling to the Pure Land from afar. That glimpse was all it took to etch a permanent memory on his soul." Xian Qi's eyes flickered with shock and realization. Could she be the heaven-breaker divine daughter of the heaven-breaker kingdom of God? He turned around and stared at the distant sky. If he was right, then his gamble had paid off far more than he could possibly imagine. He could only hope that this tiny seed would bear a beautiful flower. Outside the imperial palace, two men were ripping through space at an insane speed, so much so that Meng Jianzhu's face was hurting. Their profound energy was rumbling like thunder. He asked, "What the hell, ha? Shut up, now's not the time for questions." The old man's face looked impossibly grim. In fact, he was wishing he had the power to break through dimensions right now. Suddenly, all the sound in his ears vanished. Even the scenery before him swiftly faded in color until all that was left was deep blue. The sudden, bizarre change caught Meng Jianzhu completely off guard. He had no idea what was going on here. The old man, though, his face had turned as white as a ghost. He quickly slowed down to a halt as if an invisible hand was dragging him down. The world vanished into a sea of blue. All that was left dreamy blue and a fairy-like silhouette. The old man opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but for some reason he couldn't spit out a single thing. It was as if someone had caught him in a chokehold. Meng Qanchen's sons truly are one of a kind. The blue silhouette's voice was icy to the bone. If he couldn't teach his son properly, then I shall do it in his place. One blue flash later, Meng Jianzhu's left arm was separated from his shoulder, and he screamed. Jianzhu screamed long and loud. It was such a scream that blood was mixed within his spittle. It shouldn't have hurt this much to lose an arm, especially since he was a half-step divine extinction realm profound practitioner. However, the sword fairy's sword was no ordinary thing. A single flash contained a myriad sword intents, and to lose an arm to the sword fairy was like having his heart pierced myriad times. The old man unleashed his profound energy, but it wasn't to bandage Meng Jianzhu's wound. It was to cut off his voice and to force him to his knees. "We thank you for your disciplinary action, sword fairy. Jianzhu should not have offended you with his lowly behavior." When the old man was finally allowed to speak, the first words that came out of his mouth weren't a threat, but a platitude. Even now he dared not show a hint of anger or displeasure. Meng Jianzhu's pupils dilated in shock. The title Sword Fairy carried a lot of weight. The blue silhouette remained obscured as she spoke. "He will not rebuild his arm for 3 years, and he will get out of this place immediately." Her demands were harsh, but the old man looked overjoyed. He hurriedly pushed Meng Jianzhu's head down and bowed his own head in submission. "Thank you for showing mercy, Sword Fairy. We will leave immediately. Lady Kaylee will never see us again." When Meng Jianzhu heard those words, his eyes nearly bulged hard enough to fall out of his eye sockets. Did he just say that the girl he saw earlier was the legendary divine daughter of the Heaven-Breaker Kingdom of God? The legendary goddess who could suppress 1,000,000 realms with a single gaze, Xianxia Cultivation. It was already nigh impossible to meet the Sword Fairy, but Lady Kaylee was an even greater impossibility than that. To think that he would meet both of them in succession in this lowly realm, Meng Jianzhu's heart felt like it would burst. He truly did not know if he was lucky or unlucky beyond imagination. "You will order Meng Qanchen to keep a short leash on his sons if you know better, Meng Jingzh. He is the son of the first wife. The Dreamweaver Kingdom of God is already shameful enough. Do not allow him to lose whatever face you have left." Her voice grew distant. As if one cue, the sea of blue faded, and the world returned to normal once more. It was so abrupt that it felt like they had fallen in and out of a dream in the blink of an eye. Meng Jianzhu knew it wasn't, of course. His severed arm and his pierced soul all screamed that it was real. "Let's go." Meng Jingzh supported Meng Jianzhu once more and took off at full speed. Although the blue silhouette was already gone, he did not dare to linger for even a second longer. It was because she was the Sword Fairy, the absolute peak of the divine limit realm and the strongest profound practitioner beneath the true gods. She was Xianxia Cultivation, and Xianxia Cultivation was her one and only reverse scale. Qilin Worship Alliance, outside the main hall. The Alliance Master, Ximen Qi, and the Abyssal Knight, Ximen Boyun, were currently standing side by side with one another with a group of hall masters and helmsmasters behind his back. They looked incredibly respectful and nervous for some reason. Their faces were sterner than they had ever been as well. It was almost as if they were facing down their sworn enemies. 2 hours, 6 hours, 20 hours. Fatigue wasn't a symptom that was unique only to the mortals. Even the strongest profound practitioners could get tired if they were strung up for too long. Finally, the sect master of the Boulder Profound Sect, Ximen Qi, could hold it no longer. "Brother Boyun, do you know what young Master Meng is?" Wait. Ximen Boyan ended his question with a single word. Ximen Boyan was well aware of Meng Jianzhu's vices. If he was a better man, it would have been so much harder to lure him to the Helian Abyss realm. But despite his horrible personality and practically uncontrollable lust, he was one of the better descendants the dreamless divine regent had, and the son of his first wife. One of the two that were left, in fact. Therefore, he should have enough power to make the Helian Abyss realm a vassal state of a kingdom of God. It was perfectly normal for someone like that to show up late. It would be stranger if they had arrived on time. Another 24 hours passed, and this time it was the sect master of the Thousand Blade sect, Wan Wenchu, who asked, "Has young Master Meng arrived? Did he lose his way because of the sandstorm?" Ximen Boyan fed. "A divine son would not be stopped by a mere sandstorm." A few seconds later, he added, "In fact, young Master Meng arrived 2 days ago. He's probably just busy exploring and playing around the realm. He will show up when he wants to show up. To disturb him before the time comes would be grave disrespect." That shut everyone right up. Young Master Meng was the son of a divine regent. It was their honor to be graced with his presence. No matter how annoying his behavior might be, they must bear it in silence and without complaint. It would all be worth it if young Master Meng did make them the vassal state of a kingdom of God. They would be serving under a master and be forced to answer their bidding, but it would still be far better than where they were now. Another day passed, and this time even Ximen Boyan could not hold his temper any longer. They knew for certain that young Master Meng had shown up, but he had left them hanging for 3 whole days. This behavior was too much even for a divine son. Ximen Boring shot a glance at Ximen Boyan and said in a low tone, "Let's message him, Boyan." This time, Ximen Boyan did not maintain his stance. He immediately brought out his sound transmission, prepared his message, and sent it to their esteemed guest. Meng Jianzhu responded very quickly, and his reply was full of rage and disgust. "Fuck off!" Ximen Boyan's face darkened immediately. Everyone immediately turned to Ximen Boyan in shock and puzzlement. "What the?" Zhai Kexi, Wan Wei, and Lai Qianhong were blanching. Even the normally steady Ximen Boyan looked like he was about to explode with anger. It was like someone had force-fed him a pile of dead flies. He was an abyssal knight directly serving under the abyssal monarch and the high priests. Meng Jianzhu might be the son of a divine regent, but he should have shown him at least some modicum of respect. Instead, how dare he uttered slowly. It was rare for an abyssal knight to lose his cool this badly, but he did. It was because he was the one who promised the Helian Worship Alliance and the 3 sects that an esteemed guest from the Dreamweaver Kingdom of God would show up and grant them a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was what had truly convinced the 3 sects to submit to the Helian Worship Alliance. With this one, get lost. Meng Jianzhu had both destroyed the Helian Abyss realm's dream of becoming a vassal state and humiliated him before everyone in one go. Ximen Boyan had no idea what Meng Jianzhu had encountered, much less knew that the divine son was blaming all of his misfortunes on him. He simply thought that Meng Jianzhu was toying with and humiliating him on purpose. Ximen Borong sucked in a deep breath before turning around to face the 3 sects. He could tell from their faces exactly what they were thinking about, and it wasn't good. It looks like young Master Meng had an incident on the way. He did his best to remain calm and collected. "Since the Helian God realm is opening soon, I suppose we can postpone the matter of befriending a kingdom of God for another time." "Yes, I suppose so," Zhai Kexi nodded, but it was clear from his tone and his posture that he was no longer acting subservient. "In that case, we shall return to our sect to prepare for the Helian Abyss conference. Goodbye." He turned around and left immediately without waiting for a response. Wan Wei and the Thousand Blade sect disciples straight up left without saying a word. "Alliance Master Ximen, I heard that the Helian Empire is still going to participate in this year's God Abyss conference. They might have something up their sleeves." The sect master of the Fiery Sand sect, Lai Qianhong, advised, "Don't lose to them." "You worry too much, sect master Lai," responded Ximen Borong with a smile that didn't reach the eyes. A loud bang occurred behind Ximen Borong after the 3 sects were completely gone. Ximen Boyan's angry growl followed right after. At the same time, tens of thousands of kilometers away from the Helian Abyss realm. "I cannot believe this dogshit Ximen Boyan has the gall to message me." Bang! The sound transmission Jade Meng Jianzhu was holding was crushed into powder. His chest was heaving, and his face was contorted in an ugly expression. It wasn't because he had been tortured by the sword fairy's soul-rending sword intent for 72 hours now. In fact, his private purgatory had literally just ended a while ago when he received Ximen Qi sound transmission. At that moment, he felt so hateful he could have killed the Abyssal Knight and scattered his ashes right there and then. If it wasn't for him, he would not have gone to the Xilen Abyss realm. If not for him, he would not have been tortured and shamed. If Meng Jingzhi hadn't warned him never to approach the Xilen Abyss realm again, he would have gone there and slaughtered those shitstains who called themselves the Xilen Worship Alliance this instant. Fuck the Abyssal Knight. Now that Meng Jianzhu could finally speak and act normally again, he tossed the crushed sound transmission jade away and ordered, "Heal my left arm now, Grandpa Ji." "I will not." Meng Jingzhi did not even hesitate to reject him. "The Sword Fairy has ordered you to remain this way for 3 years, and so you will," Meng Jianzhu uttered through gritted teeth. "I'm the son of the dreamless divine regent, damn it. The Sword Fairy may be the #1 profound practitioner below the true gods, but she ultimately isn't a true god. What do we have to fear while father is still around?" "Naive," Meng Jingzhi fed coldly. "Not even your father himself would dare to say such a thing." Meng Jianzhu stared at him in stunned silence. He could not believe or understand what he had just heard. Meng Jingzhi said, "You're still young, so I won't blame you for not knowing about your history. However, this is one lesson you must never forget. Now that you've met Lady Kaylee, you must make sure to stay as far away from her as possible. To provoke Hua Kaylee is to provoke the Sword Fairy as well. And don't you forget who her fiancé is." The Lady Kaylee's fiancé was of course the divine son of the boundless kingdom of God and the strongest divine child of them all, Dian Jiaji. The abyssal monarch himself had permitted their marriage. There wasn't a soul in the entire abyss who hadn't heard about it. Meng Jianzhu's heart clenched painfully as the realization at just how narrowly he had avoided death hit him. His anger and hatred for Ximen Qi skyrocketed some more. A long time later, he finally calmed down enough to ask, "I still don't understand. You're saying that even my father is wary of the Sword Fairy. Is it because she's the younger sister of the Heart Painter Divine Regent?" Hua Fuchen, the Divine Regent of the Heaven Breaker Kingdom of God, was titled the Heart Painter. "No," Meng Jingzhi hesitated, but ultimately chose to divulge the truth. "It is because your father lost to her horribly when he was still a divine son." Meng Jianzhu was stunned to say the least. His father was like a god. No, he was a true god, but somehow he had lost to the Sword Fairy. Letter 1D442, letter 1D42F, letter 1D5C5XT, letter 1D5F0, letter 1D5C8, letter 1D426. It's not just your father. Meng Jingzhi looked terribly sad as he recalled the past. No one, not a single divine son or daughter present at that Pure Land meet, was a match for her sword. And if you're thinking it's because the divine sons and daughters of that generation were particularly weak, then think again. The participants were the Dian Rahu, the boundless divine regent, Shen Wu Yanai, the lightless divine regent, Wu Shengxing, the heaven star divine regent, Wu Shenyu, the crescent moon divine regent, Meng Kongchen, the dreamless divine regent, and Pan Yusheng, the prey eternal divine regent one. WH, what? Meng Jianzhu's eyes widened like saucers, and he stammered like his tongue was tied in a knot. Meng Jingzhi continued, "The record of their defeat was wiped away since they are all divine regents now. That is why you have no idea about it." Meng Jianzhu could not say anything for a time, and Meng Jingzhi shut his eyes to recall the past once more. The past that was buried because of how stunning it was. Boundless, Dreamweaver, Owl Butterfly. Back then, the story of their 3 divine sons trying to court Hua Qingying was easily the biggest gossip of that era. Unfortunately, the sword Hua Qingying had chosen to cultivate was the Heartless Sword, so she had severed her ties with her mortal desires since forever ago. Naturally, she cared nothing for their courtship. Today, the 3 divine sons had all become the divine regents of their respective kingdoms of God, but they might never forget that blue silhouette that had left a permanent mark in their souls. They called her Sword Fairy not because her mastery of the sword was unchallenged, but because she was an untouchable, fairy-like dream. Perhaps the real reason Dian Rahu had strongly pushed for his divine son and the Heaven Breaker divine daughter to be wed was because he was hoping to fulfill his wish indirectly. He might have failed to win the Heaven Breaker divine daughter's heart when he was the boundless divine son, but at least his son would be able to fulfill his wish. If she's that powerful, then why is Hua Fuchen leading the Heaven Breaker Kingdom of God, not her? Meng Jianzhu asked. He just couldn't understand this arrangement. Meng Jingzhi explained, "Back then, the Heaven Break Kingdom of God was bestowed 2 stars by the heavens. Hua Fuchen was able to embody 80% of a divine essence, and Hua Qingying 90. Instead of choosing only one of them to become a god-bearer, the previous heaven-breaker divine regent decided to make them both god-bearers. And so there existed a heaven-breaker divine son and heaven-breaker divine daughter in the same era. Hua Fuchen was nothing like your conventional, ambitious divine son. He acts as he pleases and obeys no customs. He hates being restricted, and the position of divine regent is practically the embodiment of loss of freedom. Add to the fact that his cultivation and his way of the sword were completely overshadowed by Hua Qingying, and just like you, everyone thought that Hua Qingying must be the next heaven-breaker divine regent. That was until Hua Fuchen had his daughter, Hua Kali. It was for her that Hua Qingying gave up her divine inheritance and her position to Hua Fuchen. That was how the heart painter divine regent and sword fairy came to be. But why? His explanation only confused Meng Jianzhu even more. Meng Jingzhu glanced at him but did not explain further. I'm not very sure about the reason either, so don't ask me about it. You just need to know that even your father dares not underestimate the sword fairy. In fact, he doubted that Meng Qingchen could even say a full sentence without stammering before her presence. He might be a true god, but he was a man before he was a god. And to a man, the love he could never have was usually his biggest weakness. Wait, something's not right. Meng Jianzhu quickly noticed a discrepancy. The heart painter divine regent is at least 10,000 years old. If Hua Kali was his daughter, then her age should be similar as well. But Hua Kali, anyone can tell she's a girl who hasn't reached emotional maturity yet, and her title only appeared. I told you to stop, Meng Jingzhu interrupted him and warned. All I know is that this relates to a secret that the abyssal monarch himself wishes to keep. Forget me, even your father probably isn't aware of the whole truth. Meng Jianzhu wasn't so stupid that he would pry into the abyssal monarch's secrets. He quickly shut his mouth as Meng Jingzhu requested. If there is one person in this world who can cultivate into a true god without a divine inheritance, it can only be Hua Qingying. That was what the high priest of the Pure Land had muttered that day. It was something Meng Jingzhu and everyone else who were present for that quote had never forgotten. It was why he had been so terrified when he realized that the girl Meng Jianzhu was trying to capture was Lady Kali. You may have lost an arm, but your trial must continue, Meng Jingzhu said seriously. Plus, your father will be furious and disappointed if you go back now, and he realizes how you lost your arm. Disappointed? The word pierced Meng Jianzhu's soul like the sword fairy's sword intent. Like I'm afraid of that. The only emotion he has for me is disappointment, Meng Jingzhu advised. Then work hard and make it to the divine extinction realm. Your father will definitely think better of you then. He will be less angry when he hears about this incident as well. It's no use. But Meng Jianzhu let out a low chuckle. I may be his son, but Meng Xianxia is his world. Even if I became a half-god, the most he would favor me with is an extra glance. Meng Jingzhu said indifferently, such is fate, you will never surpass Xianxia. Bang, Meng Jianzhu punched the floor. Why is this happening? It had taken so much effort to finally kill Meng Jianyuan, and just when I thought that I would finally enter his eyes, the stupidest of us brothers, Meng Jianxia somehow awakened his. An old, withered hand abruptly clamped over Meng Jianzhu's mouth and silenced his furious protests. Meng Jingzhu looked around frantically and laid down an isolation barrier before screaming at Meng Jianzhu. Are you insane? You must never bring up that name or that incident. Not even a single word. If we are exposed, then we are all going to die. Not even your status as the son of his first wife will save you, understand? Meng Jianzhu broke out in a cold sweat when he finally realized what he had nearly done. He hurriedly nodded like a parrot. He's very important. 1. Owl Butterfly Kingdom of God. Xianxia Qi immediately ran into Helian Lingzhu when he returned. As expected, she was looking for him all over the place. Young Master Xianxia Qi, Helian Lingzhu had called out to him from afar while running toward him. She looked absolutely pleased to see him. There was also a sheen of unwashed tears in her eyes. I thought you snuck off and left. She had enough discipline to keep a close but respectable distance from Xianxia Qi. Leave. Why would I leave? Surprise flickered across Xianxia Qi's features before he smiled. You are my savior, first princess. I would never break your trust in me. But why are you in such a hurry? What happened? Xianxia Qi asked, even though he knew exactly why she was looking for him. His question immediately turned her joy into panic. She subconsciously grabbed his sleeve and said, Father's about to die. His heart is so damaged that not even our guardian ancestor can do anything about it. You said you had a way. I know that father doesn't trust you, and his attitude toward you was extremely bad, but you're the only one who can save him now. Please, young Master Xianxia, you must save him." Her speech was a little discombobulated due to how panicked she was, but thanks to everything that had happened before, she was inexplicably confident that Xianxia could help her even when her guardian ancestor could not. A warm and gentle, profound energy washed over her. "All right, let's go check it out." Inside the main palace, Helian Lingzhu looked as white as a sheet. The fact that he was bleeding from all his orifices made the contrast even scarier. He was a half-step divine extinction realm profound practitioner, and yet he was breathing so shallowly it was almost impossible to detect. After being tortured by the Mo Baikon's profound energy for several days, Helian Lingzhu went from suppressing it with all his might to the point where he didn't dare to suppress it. Now he didn't even dare to circulate his profound energy for fear that the devil in his heart would grow even crazier. When Xianxia arrived, the hall was full of people. The princes and the princesses were all kneeling on the ground. The strongest auras across the palace were gathered here as well. They looked like they were getting ready for the emperor's final moments. The palace chief of the heavenly Helian Palace and Helian Lingzhu and Mo Kangying's master, Ku Xian, were present as well. "Father, you must hang on, father. The guardian ancestor must have a way, oh, father." The crown prince, Helian Lingzhu, was kneeling on the floor and wailing at the top of his lungs. If they didn't know better, they would have thought that the emperor was already dead. Mo Kangying had been frowning the whole time he was here. If Helian Lingzhu wasn't the crown prince, he would have emulated Xianxia's example and stomped his head into the floor. At this point, he no longer had any hope for the Helian imperial family. As the most outstanding profound practitioner of this generation, he had, of course, received invitations from the Boulder Profound sect, the Thousand Blade sect, and the Fiery Sand sect. However, he had always served Helian loyally for his sect and Helian Lingzhu. But now, he looked outside. Helian Lingzhu had finally come back after several hours of absence, and it was such a long time that he couldn't help but be disturbed by it. "I've returned, father." There was no time to waste. Helian Lingzhu forced her way through the crowd and arrived before Helian Lingzhu. Helian Lingzhu turned his head. His dim eyes abruptly glowed bright when he saw Xianxia following behind Helian Lingzhu at a leisurely pace. When he was truly pushed to the brink, when all hope seemed lost, he had remembered the one person who claimed that he had a way to save him. Back then, he had rejected him without any hesitation. But after Xianxia had displayed his extraordinary qualities, his disbelief and scorn had quickly transformed into hope. "Young Master Xianxia is here, father. He will save you." Helian Lingzhu was beyond worried, and yet she truly believed that Xianxia would be able to do something about it. It didn't make sense. Helian Lingzhu turned around to stare at Xianxia. He's the extraordinary person you said is going to save father." Xianxia ignored him completely and walked up to Helian Lingzhu. He quickly scanned Helian Lingzhu with his spiritual perception, and yep, it was more or less what he had predicted earlier. It was worth all the saliva and breath he wasted that day. "Save me," Helian Lingzhu uttered weakly. His voice was full of pain. Everyone in the hall immediately looked at Xianxia in a different light. Helian Lingzhu's condition was so bad that even the guardian ancestor could do nothing to save him, and now he was begging this young divine sovereign to save him. Xianxia ordered, "I want everyone except the first princess, brother Mo, and palace chief Ku Xian to leave the room." Ku Xian shot him a look of surprise. His order stunned everyone else as well. Helian Lingzhu immediately rose to his feet and declared in a dignified voice, "Who do you think you are, you country bumpkin? Do you think you have the right to command the imperial family?" "Get out," Helian Lingzhu wheezed. His voice was raspy, but his voice was still dignified. Helian Lingzhu spun around in disbelief. "Father, not even the guardian ancestor could help you, and he is just a divine sovereign. This is obviously a— Am I dead yet?" Helian Lingzhu roared angrily. He was being tormented during every breath he drew, and these bastards were dragging out his misery. "No, then get out of my sight, all of you." "Out," Helian Lingzhu hurriedly echoed in agreement. "As you wish, father. Everyone except M, Palace Chief Cuxian, and Ninth Senior Brother, please leave." The miscellaneous people quickly filed out of the hall. It wasn't long before the main palace fell silent once more. It was at this moment a mighty aura lingered temporarily on Xianxia. It was incredibly powerful, and yet it felt hollow on the inside. Is that the guardian ancestor? Xianxia didn't react to the probing. He continued to stare at Helian Lingzhu indifferently. "Can you really save His Majesty, young man?" Ku Xian asked. His tone was doubtful, but he did not underestimate him. He had learned how Xianxia had healed a young boy from Helian Lingzhu and Mo. It was why he was astonished and extremely curious about his background. Xianxia replied, "My cultivation is weak, so of course I cannot interfere with a half-god's profound qi directly. But medically speaking, there is a way to treat His Majesty." "Medical?" Xian frowned. He was a doctor himself, but from what he could tell, Helian Lingzhu's injury was impossible to solve from a medical standpoint. Everyone knows that if you suffer a wound in your life vein, and the heart is a part of it, then it is almost guaranteed to be a permanent injury, not because it's untreatable, but because the slightest mistake could result in death. In reality, the life vein can be split into 72 orifices, and 17 of them can be destroyed without crippling the patient or causing their life energy to leak too rapidly. If their cultivation is strong enough, they can even heal back to full health, albeit slowly. Since it's impossible to neutralize the profound energy directly, my idea is to break open these 17 orifices and guide the energy out of the life vein. Xianxia made it sound so simple, but to Xian, it was practically a fantasy. As far as he knew, to damage one's life vein was to kill someone. Even poking one small hole in it would severely cripple or outright kill the person, much less 17. Whatever Xianxia's background might be, he found it difficult to believe that Xianxia could be more knowledgeable and experienced than him in this regard, and everything he knew told him that this was impossible. Even if what Xianxia said was true, how could he accurately breach only those 17 orifices? This was the life vein they were talking about. One single mistake, and the Emperor's life energy might just leak out in a rush and kill him in an instant. Is that even possible? Xian frowned deeply. This was a stretch too far for him to believe. Instead of explaining, Xianxia looked at Helian Lingzhu and said, "I've told you the plan before, Your Majesty. I'll be opening 17 holes in your life vein. It's up to you whether to proceed with the operation." Helian Lingzhu's eyes bulged. He looked like he would reject it, when in reality he said without hesitation, do it now." It was because he already had one foot in the grave. Even if Xianxia was lying, the worst-case scenario would be his death, which he was already on his way to anyway. "Very well," Xianxia declared. "But before we talk about treatment, we must talk about payment. After all, you were the one who sent me away first. I see no reason to save someone who distrusts me." Once again, Xian shot him a look of astonishment. He had heard of Xianxia's impudence already, but he really wasn't afraid of the Emperor at all. In fact, he acted like he was the Emperor here. Helian Lingzhu squeezed through his lips again. "If you can save me, then I will accept anything." Xianxia smiled and turned to Helian Lingzhu. "My condition is very simple. I want the first princess to be in charge of the Helian side 20 days later when the Ximen Abyss conference begins. I know you're the one who should be leading the charge, but your time is better spent resting in the palace, don't you agree?" His condition surprised everyone. Helian Lingzhu's lips were parted, and Mo looked beyond, conflicted to say the least. Who would have thought that Xianxia would make a request that didn't benefit him one bit? Normally, the Emperor himself was required to show up for a grand event like this. Of course, the Emperor could delegate this task to his descendants, but if he did delegate it to Helian Lingzhu, then it was the same as saying that the future successor of the empire was her, not the crown prince. "Young Master Xianxia, Helian Lingzhu was at a loss for words. "I agree with your request." Right now, Helian Lingzhu would agree to even the most outlandish requests, much less one as simple as this. After all, he was about to die. Also, the Ximen Worship Alliance was going to participate in the Ximen Abyss Conference this time, and if the imperial family lost the right to enter the Ximen God realm to them, then they would be the laughingstock of the century, which was exactly why he didn't want to go in the first place. In that sense, this arrangement was perfect for him. "Good," Xianxia nodded with a cunning glint in his eyes. Having Helian Lingzhu in charge of the Helian side was the same as having him in charge. After all, Helian Lingzhu was practically his obedient servant at this point. This would make it so much easier for him to control things. It would also prevent accidents from happening to the maximum degree. "Palace Chief Xian, I'll leave it to you to guide the outflow of the energy." Before Xian could respond, he reached out and tapped Helian Lingzhu's chest with his right hand. Bang, Helian Lingzhu's chest split open. A moment later, Mo's aura became tens of times clearer than before. The pressure it was releasing was immense, to say the least. Xian forced himself to stay silent even as his expression warped into deep shock. Now was not the time. He immediately thrust his wizened palms forward and summoned tens of thousands of soothing yet powerful streams. They all wrapped around Helian Lingzhu's heart. Boom, rumble. Violent streams of half-god profound energy started shooting out of Helian Lingzhu's heart in intervals. They burst through the roof and into the sky with a kind of rage that would never fade. 20 days came and went in the blink of an eye. During this time, no one tried to give Xianxia Qi any trouble. It was because the Ximen Worship Alliance could not find anything regarding Xianxia Qi. It was like he had suddenly appeared in the Ximen Abyss realm one day. It was unusual at the least, so much so that the Ximen Worship Alliance wisely chose not to single Xianxia Qi out for revenge, at least not until the Ximen Abyss conference was over. Today, countless profound practitioners from all walks of life gathered at the center of the Ximen Abyss realm. Helian Lingzhu led the Helian Empire with Ku Xian by her side. Accompanying her were their best profound practitioners of their youth. They boarded a profound boat and flew toward the Ximen god realm. As they grew closer, Xianxia Qi could feel the heretic god profound vein shivering a little with anticipation. This is it, Xianxia Qi thought to himself, the complete heretic god profound vein is just ahead of me. This was just the prelude. His journey in the abyss would truly begin only after he had obtained everything. 1. Poor guy. Letter 1D5C8, letter 1D5CFXD. Letter 1D554, letter 1D698, letter 1D4DC. On the profound boat, Helian Lingzhu looked fraught with worry. It painted a stark contrast against the young, excited, profound practitioners of the Helian Heavenly Palace. Everyone and their mothers knew that the Helian Empire was in decline, and that decline had been continuing for ages. However, these profound practitioners knew nothing about their latest circumstances. They did not know that the Ximen Alliance had won the three sects' support, or that they would be joining the Ximen Abyss Conference this time. They didn't even know the Abyssal Knight witnessing this Ximen Abyss Conference came from the Ximen Worship Alliance. They all thought that the Helian Empire would enter the Ximen God realm like every other time, even if they would be entering as the weakest participants. It was because Helian Lingzhu had done everything in his power to keep Zhai Liancheng and Ximen Qi's declarations that day a secret. Otherwise, it was guaranteed to cause a huge panic and unpredictable chaos, not to mention that Helian Lingzhu had fallen unconscious at the end. He literally couldn't do anything else even if he wanted to. Everyone understood why Helian Lingzhu wouldn't be attending the Ximen Abyss Conference this time. It was because he was grievously injured and needed bed rest. No one expected Helian Lingzhu to be leading their group, the Crown Prince Helian Linglang more than anyone. He had been furious and confused, puzzled and fearful. Such was his fear that he personally visited Helian Lingzhu in his seclusion multiple times and even tried to force his way in after multiple rebuffs. Of course, he was blasted out of the chamber immediately. That said, the Crown Prince was the Crown Prince, and Helian Lingzhu was just a woman. Although the Emperor himself had given the order, the top geniuses of the Helian Empire still flocked around Helian Linglang. The only ones who stayed with Helian Lingzhu were Xianxia Qi and Mo Kangying. On the other side of the boat, Helian Linglang kept shooting dark glances at Helian Lingzhu and Xianxia Qi. "You do not need to look so concerned, brother," a Helian prince standing next to him advised. "It is rumored that sister was the one who healed father, so it's not surprising that father would give her a reward. You'll still be the heir to the throne when all is said and done." "That's right," the chief disciple of the Helian Heavenly Palace, Fang Zhang, added. "The first princess may enjoy a good reputation, but you're still the crown prince. Try as she might, she will not inherit the throne before you." Helian Linglang's expression did not improve, however. He glanced at Mo Kangying once. The divine master had never thought well of him, and he never would, before returning his gaze to Xianxia Qi once more. "It's all that pretty face's fault. Where on earth did he come from?" "Who cares?" Another Helian prince scoffed. "In the end, he's just sister's boy toy. Speaking of which, Mo Kangying's face is looking pretty ugly as of late. It won't be long before, hehe." A chorus of laughter followed. This time, even Helian Linglang found the humor to curl the corners of his lips upward. Although they were standing very far apart from one another, Mo Kangying was the Helian Heavenly Palace's most outstanding disciple and a third-level divine master. Naturally, he heard everything. He clenched his fists tightly and frowned like a thunderstorm, but he did not do anything. It was at this moment Xianxia Qi walked up to him. "Brother Mo," he started, "the first princess looks like she's in a bad mood. She can probably use your company." Mo Kangying maintained his posture. He didn't even glance at Xianxia Qi as he said, "It will be better if you go." "Me?" Xianxia Qi looked surprised and puzzled. Then he burst into a chuckle. I don't understand what you mean, brother Mo. Yes, you do. Mo Kangying's voice hardened. Please don't treat me like an idiot. Right now, she only has eyes for you, and the only reason you're staying is because of her. I've been watching her since she joined the Helian Heavenly Palace as an ordinary disciple. Therefore, I know her better than anyone. Mo Kangying turned away. It is her choice who she wants to fall in love with, and so it is yours. I will not comment about it, nor will I get angry over it. It is beneath me. But you coming over to provoke me like this, he let out a cold snort, I have to admit that you've made me think less of you. Xianxia's smile vanished. Instead of leaving, he stepped closer until he was right next to Mo Kangying. Brother Mo, have you wondered how long I've been in contact with the first princess? Mo Kangying. Xianxia said slowly, if we ignore the time the two of you carried me from the sandstorm to the Helian Heavenly Palace, and the time we flew from the Helian Heavenly Palace to the Imperial Palace, I've known her for less than 6 hours at most. You, on the other hand, have been her closest companion since youth. You've both started at the lowest lows, and you've supported each other every step of the way. Your relationship is so deep that no other relationship could even compare. That is why you did not hesitate to go after the first princess when she went into the endless fog alone. I am sure she would do the same for you. I am just an outsider. It hasn't even been a month since we first met, and our relationship is best described as shallow. Xianxia shook his head. Do you seriously think it can compare to your bond with the first princess? Mo Kangying looked at him. But, there is no but, Xianxia smiled. I can even prove that you are mistaken. You said that I'm doing this because I'm in love with the first princess, but in reality I'm only doing this to repay her favor and indulge in a bit of selfishness. You see, I'm interested to check out the Ximen God realm as well. It is the secret realm that the abyssal monarch himself set up. Of course I would be curious about it, no? He said with an honest face. As a man, there are few favors more important than being saved from the jaws of death. Of course I have to do everything in my power to repay it. I'm sure you would have done the same thing. Mo Kangying looked like he wanted to say something, but Xianxia continued. Also, I'll be leaving the Ximen Abyss realm immediately after the Ximen Abyss conference is over. We may never meet again. Mo Kangying wheeled toward Xianxia. You're leaving? Of course, Xianxia said matter-of-factly and without a hint of regret. This isn't my birthplace, and I have no reason to stay here after repaying the favor. That's why you're wrong to say that I'm in love with the first princess. Just the same, you are wrong to say that the first princess is in love with me. Mo Kangying looked clearly moved. His coldness from before was completely gone. The Helian Empire has been declining for ages, and the first princess had learned of the Ximen Worship Alliance's ambition beforehand. She was so desperate that she went into the endless fog alone. That is why she is clinging to me not like a lover, but a straw of hope that might just keep the darkness at bay. That is why she acts overly trusting and earnest with me. Now that I think about it, she is probably betting that my background can save the Helian Empire. All things considered, Xianxia shook his head wryly, there is just no way she is in love with me. Mo Kangying was clearly convinced. In fact, this whole conversation was a rather enlightening experience for him. You and her are as close as family, and you are literally irreplaceable to one another. On the other hand, I am at best a warm blanket that appeared at the right time when the storm arrived. There is just no comparison between the two of us. Finally, Xianxia looked in Helian Lingzhu's direction and said, she would be sad if you're not by her side at this time. Brother Mo. Mo Kangying abruptly rose to full height and turned toward Helian Lingzhu. However, he turned back immediately and said, Brother Yun, I feel the same kindness you extend to Lingzhu and the imperial family. If you really manage to bring the Helian Empire into the Ximen God realm, then feel free to ask me anything while you're still in the Ximen Abyss realm. You have my word that I will fulfill any request. Before Xianxia could respond, he turned away and went over to Helian Lingzhu. After Mo Kangying was gone, Xianxia leaned against a wall with eyes that looked as calm as a pool of dead water. Mo Kangying didn't realize it, but even if he really thought of the kindness he extended to Helian Lingzhu as his own, it was just a small part of why he changed his mind. It was his guilt toward his misunderstanding and his gratefulness for being enlightened that really changed his perception of him in the end. In the end, Mo Kangying was just a simple-minded person. A single conversation was all it took to regain his loyalty. Mo Kangying was clearly inexperienced in romance. Otherwise, he would have realized that a lifetime of love could not compare to one heartfelt moment. This was true for both men and women. This outcome was good, though. At the very least, he would not be a variable he needed to watch out for. In fact, he might even prove to be useful. He was starting to act like Kai Waiao after absorbing her memories. The Xilen divine domain lay at the center of the Xilen abyss realm. It was where the entrance to the Xilen god realm was located. The Xilen god realm possessed the most ferocious sand and stone in the abyss. It was also where its final Xilen resided. A lot of people were interested in the final Xilen, but few people ever visited the Xilen abyss realm. It was because the barrier created to protect it had been created by the abyssal monarch himself, and it opened only once every 600 years. Short of trying to breach the barrier, there was just no point visiting the place. Today, the Xilen divine domain was overflowing with large and small profound boats. The Xilen god realm had always been controlled by the Helian dynasty and the three sects. Therefore, everyone thought of the Xilen Abyss Conference as a competition between the three sects. A competition to decide who gets to enjoy the largest pie in the Xilen god realm. That said, only the brightest, greatest geniuses of the Xilen Abyss realm were allowed to participate in the Xilen Abyss Conference. It wasn't an actual requirement, but it might as well be. Moreover, they were guaranteed to grow stronger after the Xilen god realm or even experience a complete transformation. In the future, they were most certainly going to join the highest powers of the Xilen Abyss realm as well. In that sense, the participants of the Xilen Abyss Conference were also the future rulers of the Xilen Abyss realm. Naturally, all factions wanted to watch it if only to figure out what the Xilen Abyss realm would become decades later. The audience in the sky alone numbered almost 100,000. This would be a paltry number in the God realm, but in the abyss where the population was struggling just to survive to the next generation, it was a lot of people. The Boulder Profound Sect, Thousand Blade Sect, and Fiery Sand Sect were already waiting at the center area. The Helian Empire's Profound Boat was present as well, but anyone could tell that their presence was far weaker than the three sects. The three sects kept growing stronger, and the Helian Empire kept weakening with every generation. This was something everyone has been aware of for a long time. They had no doubt the main competition would be between the three sects, and the Helian Empire was just here to claim the last spot as usual. Since this was the first time she took charge of such an important occasion, Helian Lingzhu had to give it her all to maintain her facade of calmness and dignity. In reality, she was more nervous and worried than she had ever been in her life. Her eyes quickly found the Xilen Worship Alliance standing in a distant, practically inconspicuous corner of the area. If she didn't know better, she would have thought they were part of the audience. Someone noticed her glance and shot her an arrogant smirk. "Xianxia," she messaged carefully, Are you sure it'll be fine?" "Trust me and yourself," Xianxia replied in a gentle voice. "I have never broken a promise." That was true. The Boulder Profound Sect and the Xilen Worship Alliance were nothing to him, and he had solved something that had balked even the Guardian Ancestor with ease. Helian Lingzhu sucked in a deep breath and felt just a little calmer than before. Oh, the Imperial family sent a girl to participate in the Xilen Abyss Conference this time. A scathing voice suddenly came from the side. It belonged to the young sect master of the Thousand Blade Sect, Wan Zhangyu. He was looking at her out of the corner of his eye, and his tone was arrogant and filled with a bit of schadenfreude. "Girl," Mo Kengying immediately stared at him like a hawk. "Are you blind? How dare you disrespect the first princess?" "Oh, she's the first princess?" Wang Changyu exclaimed with feigned realization before turning even more arrogant. "So what if I disrespect her? Are you going to exile me to the sandy pits, or are you going to execute me up to the 9 generations? I'm so scared." It was blatant disrespect toward the Helian Empire, but not a single one of his companions tried to stop him. In fact, they were laughing with him. "Ignore him," Helian Lingzhu said. She was well aware that the Empire's presence would only work on civilians and small to middle sects. Against the three sects, they were nothing more than a laughingstock. The Thousand Blade sect wasn't done with them, though. Wang Changshan, the youngest son, said loudly, "It's been years since the Helian Emperor was tortured by Senior Mo's profound energy, and I heard that he could die at any moment. Since he didn't show up for something as grand as the Xilen Abyss Conference, do you think?" "Ha ha ha ha. Nah, maybe he had something urgent he had to attend to. More like he got scared and didn't dare to show his face." Another chorus of laughter erupted. Mo Kangying's eyes burned with rage, but he didn't erupt because Helian Lingzhu was still ignoring them and keeping her cool. Helian Linglang, though, he looked blue in the face as he muttered under his breath, "If father hadn't insisted on attending, how humiliating." It was at this moment that Zhai Kexi, the current sect master of the Boulder Profound sect and the champion of the previous Helian Abyss conference, flew into the air and declared, "The time is up. We greet the Abyssal Knight who has come from the Pure Land to witness this year's Helian Abyss conference." The barrier surrounding the Helian God realm had been laid down by the Abyssal Monarch himself, which was why a divine rune from the Pure Land was necessary to open it, and why the presence of an Abyssal Knight was necessary. They were both the gate opener and supervisor of the Helian God realm. Later, when the three sects slowly rose to power and the Helian God Conference became a thing, the Abyssal Knight was invited to the Helian Abyss Conference to bear witness, and as a gesture of respect, a silhouette slowly floated into the sky. The silver armor he was wearing shone a cold glint and pierced everyone's eyes and souls. More than that, the divine rune on the back of his hand nearly glowed bright enough to illuminate the entire Helian divine domain. "Greetings, Sir Knight." Xianxia Cultivation was the first one to drop to his knees. The rest of the sect quickly followed. Every other profound practitioner at the scene dropped to their knees as well. It was almost like they were worshipping a god, which wasn't far away from the truth. To the denizens of the Abyss, the Pure Land was the ultimate sanctuary. Naturally, the people of Pure Land were like gods as well. Cries of surprise immediately broke out after the Abyssal Knight showed his face, however. Is he? Ximen Qi? It really is Ximen Qi. Countless people looked up in shock, and the stunned cries rippled outward like a wildfire. That's right, he was the Vice Alliance Master of the Helian Worship Alliance, Ximen Qi. Didn't he die a few years ago? To think he's become an Abyssal Knight. The rumors were actually true. Not only did he survive the endless fog, he even became an Abyssal Knight of the Pure Land. Then, does that mean that the Helian Worship Alliance is actually a prominent faction now? Letter 1D4A, letter 1D4B1, letter 1D40BXT. The cries of astonishment wouldn't stop for a long time. Very soon, the crowd would shoot doubtful and sympathetic looks at the Helian side. Everyone knew that the Helian Worship Alliance was growing quickly. It had long since looked like they would become the fourth biggest sect of the Helian Abyss realm. Now that they had an Abyssal Knight, they should be stronger than the Helian Empire, right? Did this mean that a fifth faction would be entering the Helian God realm? Or would they eliminate the weakest link so that the pie wouldn't be spread too thin? If that was the case, countless eyes sought out the Helian Worship Alliance. They immediately discovered that their profound practitioners were standing by for something. The Alliance Master, Ximen Qi, and the young Alliance Master, Ximen Hong, were all present. The Helmsmasters and the Hallmasters were present as well. The young profound practitioners at the back were clearly preparing for combat as well. They were definitely going to participate in this year's Helian Abyss Conference.